Dispatch promised sand trucks at first light. What came out of the snow before that wasn't a truck. I run the night plow up and down the last miles of US 41 into Copper Harbor. The lake, a black wall to my left, and the pines to my right bent under fresh weight. The storm finally blew itself out. No flakes now. Just that heavy hush you get when fresh snow takes the sound out of the world. The heater breathed a steady warmth. Chains ticked against the shoulder once in a while. I've done this route 3 winters straight and could almost steer by muscle memory. Ditch on the right, rock cut on the left, a guardrail scuffed by somebody braver than smart. The plow's blade hissed. My headlamps threw twin cones into a clean darkness and made it our small world. No radio chatter. My phone flashed 2 bars and then none. The night belonged to my lights and to whatever they didn't reach. Mile marker 27, then 26 floated up white and perfect. I dropped the wing a notch to push the windrow farther out. Somewhere behind the seat, my thermos rattled at bumps I knew by heart. At 24.6, a sedan sat crosswise in a turnout, nose buried to the bumper. Hazards doing that tired blink you only get from a battery on its last courtesy. I eased down, angling the blade to shield the car. Habit made me key the mic, even though dispatch hadn't answered in 20 minutes. Unit 62, stopped with a stuck vehicle east of Brockway Cutoff, I said. 1 occupant maybe. I'm checking. The reply arrived a heartbeat late. 1 occupant maybe. The radio answered back in my voice, thin and flat. I looked at the speaker, then the empty road like it might explain itself. Bad cokes, I told myself. Water in a connector from the last blow. Copy, I said anyway, to test it. Proceeding to check. Another delayed copy chased me over the speaker. Proceeding to check. Not an echo. Echoes don't think first. I unplugged the mic. The LED still glowed. I flipped the power switch off. The glow hung there a second, as if deciding whether to obey, then went dark. I sat with the heater humming and tried to make it a small thing. Winter chews wires. You see glitches. I took a flashlight and stepped down. The cold pinned my nose hairs together on the first breath. The lake sky was starless and absolute. The sedan's hood wore a neat drift. A thin stripe of thaw haloed the lower windshield where the defroster had tried. No one in the driver's seat. Boot-scuffed snow around the door, then smoothed by spindrift. I circled with the beams slow, careful to keep the plow and its light behind me like a promise. The passenger door stood cracked as if someone had tried it and thought better. "Highway," I called. "You all right?" A child's voice answered from the tree line a half-second too late. "You all right?" The hair along my arms prickled inside the coat. Plenty of reasons a kid might repeat a line wrong. None of them explain a child being out here at 2 a.m. I found prints where the shoulder ended and brush began. Barefoot, not boots. Human. The toes splayed and longer than mine. Each impression deep, as if whatever made them weighed too much for its size. A damp curl of steam turned out of them and faded like breath where no breath should be. I called 911, I said, not to the trees so much as to the space between them. "Stay where you are." "Stay where you are," the voice said back, late again, like a bad satellite call. I backed toward the cab without giving the trees my spine. The door latch sounded too loud in the quiet. Inside, the heater's small noises felt like a room. I put the truck in gear and edged the blade so the turnout became a pocket. If someone approached, they'd have to step into my light first. That was the rule we were using this month. No one up to the cab unless we made contact first. 2 knocks, then 1. We started that after a tow guy got jumped by a drunk with a tire iron last year. Knock the code or get the window, no exceptions. Something touched the wing behind me, not a hit, a weight, polite as a hand on a shoulder. The truck settled on its springs and came back. No scrape, no drag. I watched the right mirror. It held a wedge of white and my running lights washing backward. No footsteps over the engine. The weight lifted. A smell came through the vents. Freezer burn and wet dog, and that penny metal taste that puts blood in your mouth without a wound. The kind of smell that says meat without showing you any. The radio was off. It spoke anyway, in a woman's voice I hadn't heard in years. "Eli," it said in my mother's sound, careful with each syllable, like she was reading it. "You're out. You're cold. Let me in." I put my finger on the dead switch without flipping it. "Not funny," I said, quieter than I meant to. Nobody on this peninsula knows my mother's voice. She died before I took the job. The reply came with that breath's delay. "Not funny." Then, almost as an afterthought, the same voice smoothed the rhythm and said, "Perfectly normal. Eli, please." The shape of my name tried to sit in my mouth, and I refused to give it back to the dark. Glass thudded by my shoulder. 3 taps, evenly spaced, almost gentle. Not a panic knock. A knock someone practicing the idea of a knock might make. Our code is 2 knocks, then 1. If a trooper or tow-up comes up in weather, they make that rhythm with a flashlight butt, and I open. You don't need to look. You know by the measure. I kept my hands where they were and let the wrong rhythm sit in the cab until the heater dried it away. 2, then 1, I said. If you're a person. The answer came a hair late. 2, then 1. Then, after a counted pause, 3 tidy taps again. The same wrong. I eased forward. The blade hissed. Between the pines ahead, something stood at a height that didn't fit. Not moose tall, signpost tall, the proportions wrong, arms hanging a little too long and jointed like it had more hinges than it ought to. I kept the lamps just off it, so I could be honest with myself later about what I'd seen. Shape, height, not face. Eyes reflected like an animal's, but set first at a human height, and then higher when it leaned. When my beam crossed it, my breath made strings in the cab, and I tasted cold metal. I cleared a lane around the sedan and started rolling for the DOT shed at the harbour. The shed had heat, and a wood stove our day guy kept going out of stubbornness. A burn barrel out front for pallets. I wasn't playing knock codes on an empty highway while something tried on my mother's voice. The radio picked another voice. "Dispatch to 62, it said. Bright and crisp, almost right. Status check. No lag, no thinness. For a heartbeat, it had me perfectly, and relief went through me before sense caught it. 62's good, I said. And then, because of the tow incident, we did the new thing. What's the word of the night? We hang a small chalkboard by the shop door. Every shift writes a word. Tonight, it was beaver, because one dam flooded M26 last spring, and nobody stopped telling the story. You can't guess it from outside. The answer came late and wrong. Word of the night, the voice repeated, savouring shape more than meaning. Then, after that clumsy pause, it offered, night. I set the mic down. The sedan's hazards dimmed and died. I watched for other tracks leaving the turnout. The only human prints were the barefoot ones that went into the trees and ended, not at a trunk or rock, just ended in the open where snow should remember a next step. Wind can skin a page smooth, I told myself. only there was no wind, and the rest of the page still had texture. At the shed, I pulled into the yard and turned the plough so its blade faced the road. The barrel stood under a lid of crusted snow. I kicked it, stacked broken pallets, and lit a flare when my matches stuck to my gloves. The flare painted the yard in soft orange. Heat is nice to see when your molars start talking behind your jaw. I held the flare under the pallet slats until the splinters took. The shop door was unlocked like it always is at night when the other guy catches a nap. "Nate," I called. "You in?" Nothing. A thermos on the bench gave off a ghost of steam. Someone had been here within the hour. A glove lay palm up like a dropped question. The stove gave back a small warmth. A log had collapsed. Ash only just skimmed over. I put 2 splits on and hung the plough mic by the map, the radio itself still off. The yard floods had tripped at the panel. When I reset them, they stayed dark. 2, then 1, I said to the door out of habit, and opened it, looking at the barrel, not the yard. The flare had burned down to a finger of ember, but the pallet stack had caught and fed itself. 3 taps came from the plough's driver door across the yard. The same tidy measure, polite as before. I watched my breath go out in ropes and come back thin. Beyond the orange wash, the yard was a blank screen you could project anything on if you needed to. I chose the fire. The radio spoke as if from inside a cupped hand. "Nate," it said, late with the name like it had to think of its shape. "Nate, I'm at the door." I didn't answer. Nate isn't a voice you confuse. He sings without realizing. The yard had no song. A figure stood where yard meets road a minute later, not coming in, just there. Too tall for comfort. In the barrel's reach, it seemed to bend wrong. Maybe knees, maybe the drift making tricks. The smell came with it on nothing. Freezer burn, wet dog, copper. The flame drew a slow breath first one way, then the other, as if the air was thinking. Heat wobbled. "Help me," a woman said on the dead radio in my mother's shape, almost warm. Careful, separate words. Someone practicing. Then, because it was learning me, the cadence improved. "Please." I stepped toward the stove instead of the door and opened the draft so the fire had its own voice. The barrel woke up. The wood found itself and burned steadier. I stuck another flare in the snow and lit it. Orange widened. The figure reacted, not to light exactly, but to heat. The motion it made was the first rule-breaking thing my head couldn't file. Too fast for that size, like a spider, if a spider were 12 feet tall. It covered the edge of the light and stopped where the flare's warmth would have bumped its face. For a thin slice of a second, light got up under the overhang of the roof and drew a line across what might have been a chest. I thought I saw ribs and skin pulled wrong over angles that didn't belong on any deer or man. Then the angle changed and it became only shadow and height again. "Don't," I heard myself say. I didn't know to whom. The knock came again. 3 polite taps on the plough door. Behind them, a sound like breath with no vapor. My own breath smoked in air the yard lights refused to cut. The nearest flood fixture was frosted inside its glass. 2, then 1, I said, because repeating the rule is how you keep a line straight. A beat late. 2, then 1. Then the same tidy 3. Consistent. Consistency saves you. I shut the door. The shop got small and safe feeling in that way that isn't safety. The landline by the time clock was dead. I looked at the wall map and penciled an X where the sedan had been, because it felt like a thing I could do. Under it I wrote, 3 taps, polite, wrong tempo. Then, word of the night equals beaver. It calmed the part of me that needs names. There is a time in every long night when you decide you must have slept. I must have, because the window showed a paler black and the barrel had eaten its top layer of wood. The radio spoke with a crispness I could tell before the words was human. State Police, Unit 707 and coming into the DOT yard at Copper Harbour, a man said. No lag, no thinness. The ordinary cadence of a voice that isn't trying to be anyone else. Copy anyone? I pushed the door open and met the cruiser's headlamps with my palm up. The trooper idled in the road and looked small against all that snow. I brought him into the heat the yard light still wouldn't give. He held his hands out, fingertips pinked the way they get when you've been gripping a wheel for hours. You call this in? He asked. My set was dead, I said. Everything was. He glanced at the plough, saw it sitting. Figured I'd check. He didn't ask about knocks. I didn't volunteer. We stood with the barrel and looked at an ordinary yard. It was cleaner at the plough's door where the tapping had been. Wind will wipe a spot smooth if it finds an edge and makes an eddy. That is a true thing I prefer to say aloud. We found Nate near sunup walking in from the harbour with a box of donuts, like a man who'd remembered mid-shift that we eat. He'd slept in his truck by the dock because his windshield iced on the inside, and he didn't trust the wipers to wake if he killed the engine. That's also true. He set the donuts down and asked why the yard floods were frosted inside their own glass. By noon, my dashcam gave us nothing but road and snow, and the powder lifting off the blade. The audio did something else. After I said, Unit 62 stopped with a stuck vehicle, there was a thinner copy, a fraction of a second late. You could call it echo. You could also say there was nothing to bounce off in that turnout, and nothing in that air to carry it back. The sedan was gone by then. A friend with the tractor had tugged it while we were still blinking the breaker, like that mattered. On my last pass, I stopped where the barefoot prints ended mid-sentence. In daylight, the wind had done what wind does to stories, wrote new ones on top. A crust had formed. If you wanted to see it, you could tell where the drift had skinned over something that wasn't quite the same texture as the field around it. That's what I tell myself. It works better than thinking the page simply stopped. I didn't write a report about voices. There isn't a box for voices. I wrote hazards, turnout, footprints. I wrote lit barrel, waited for dawn, spoke to trooper. I didn't write the smell. That week, we kept the chalkboard game, but changed the rule. No more words anybody might guess from a story. We use things only we know. Nicknames from old dogs and bends in creeks we named with shovels one spring. We still knock, 2, then 1, when we wake the other guy so he doesn't bring a shovel to the door. If you plough nights on the Q&R long enough, you learn what the county won't print. Silence can be a sound. Anything that asks for invitation in snow country, where cars go quiet too fast and phones pretend to live while they die, isn't to be trusted just because it gets the words right. My rule lives on the shop map in pencil where only I can find it. Don't answer the third knock, and if a voice arrives a heartbeat late, it isn't one of ours. I thought the smell was the deer until it spoke. The air inside the cab was cold enough to sting my teeth when I breathed in. I'd killed the heater 20 minutes earlier because the blower had started to squeal and the noise was getting under my skin. It was just me, a cube van full of dry goods for a lodge opening late winter, and an empty ribbon of Highway 60, cutting through black pines and snow. I'd driven this road a dozen times in winter. You plan your stops, you top off in Huntsville. You don't get cute about shortcuts. The rule is simple. Keep moving. Don't linger. That night, I broke the rule because I saw the deer. It lay across the lane like a dark sack, legs askew, fur rimed with frost. I eased to a stop, hazard lights ticking, and rolled my window down halfway. The smell hit first, like someone had left a freezer open for weeks and then poured wet dog into it. Not blood, not fresh anyway. Old cold, stale and sweet at the edges. It curled into the cab and settled in my throat. I clicked on my headlamp and stepped out. The crunch of snow under my boots sounded too loud. The forest pressed up to the shoulder here, black and close. The plough berm made a waist-high wall of churned ice. I hugged the van's headlights and kept one hand on the hood, like a kid touching the side of the pool. The deer wasn't quite whole. No gore, not really. More like the meat had been pared down clean along one flank, ribs shining with frost. The odd thing was the line behind it. The body had been dragged, slow, back and forth across the lane, drawing a soft channel in the powder, as if something indecisive had paced the deer like a toy. The tracks themselves were filled with drift and hard glare ice. I couldn't make a pattern. I towed the carcass, tried to shove it just enough so I wouldn't have to straddle it with the van. The cold bit through the boot leather. Great, I muttered, because talking out loud makes empty roads feel less empty. Kev? The voice came softly from the trees on my right. I went still. My brother's name, in a hush that found the hollow behind my heart, like a finger pressing there. Kevin? It tried again, the second syllable a half-beat late, like a word learned in pieces. My brother lives in North Bay. He and I don't sound alike, but this was his voice. The breath on the name was wrong, like you could hear ice in it. I took 2 backward steps until my hip bumped the headlight. Hello, I called, because habit is stupid and powerful, and because a winter road plays tricks on your thinking. Branches trembled deeper in the dark, not wind, there wasn't any. The trees were holding their breath, the way they do just before snow falls. My headlamp threw a white cone past the plough berm, and the beam found a stand of young birch. Something was behind them. Tall, too tall, wrong tall. The shape was a smear more than a figure, but the line of it hooked my mind. Shoulders too narrow, arms too long, and a suggestion of points above that I took for a tangle of dead branches until the shape moved and the points moved with it. Kev, closer, the same voice. The timing still not quite right. It put the stress on the wrong place, like someone reading off a page in a language they only half understood. I could feel my name turning brittle in the air as it said it. False relief came like a gift. Headlights rounding the bend behind me, sweeping the trunks. Another vehicle. I lifted an arm, ready to wave them past or flag them down. The oncoming lights washed the tree line, and for a fraction of a second, the shape behind the birch seemed to lean away from the glare in a long, insectile bend. Then the truck, bigger than mine, roared through the far lane, never slowing, a tide of wind and grit trailing behind it. My shadow swung giant and stupid on the snow, and then the road was empty again. The night closed quick as a mouth. I put both hands on the van's hood because they were shaking. The metal was cold enough to stick. I slid back toward the driver's door, keeping my eyes on the birch. "This is ridiculous," I said, to hear something human. The voice found a new trick. "Little brother," it said. "That's what my brother calls me, and has since we were kids." The words were in the right order this time. but the warmth was wrong, scraped out. There was a sound under the word brother, a delicate grinding, like frost being crushed between teeth. I think that was when the part of me that knows the rules flashed a sign. Stop engaging, get inside, lock everything, leave. I obeyed badly, but I obeyed. I slid behind the wheel and thumbed the locks. The hazard lights clicked on with a polite rhythm, red washing the snowbank, the deer's glazed eye catching the tint and reflecting it back as a dead ember. I turned the key. The starter whined. The van coughed and wheezed and thought about it. The blower motor squealed like before, a high, childish sound. Come on. The needle in the temperature gauge hadn't moved since Dwight Beach Road. I pumped the pedal once, twice, like a prayer. From the windshield, a faint pattern bloomed, feathery lines blossoming out from the lower passenger corner, delicate as fern, spreading as if something on the other side had breathed on the glass, and the breath had frozen there. I watched it grow in a slow fan until it reached the middle. The ice glittered in the headlamp's bounce. Kev, a whisper now, right alongside the van. The sheet metal thrummed, just once, as if something big had leaned its weight casual against the door to listen. The hazard ticked, tick, tick. The road lay blank for miles. The forest did what it does in deep cold, absorbed sound and gave nothing back. The engine caught on the next turn, more by luck than mechanics, a ragged rumble that steadied into a low idle. I exhaled and put my forehead to the wheel for 1 second, no more. When I looked up, the ice fan had crept higher. In the center of it, 2 small clear circles had formed where the fern lines did not adhere, inches apart and at a height that made my scalp crawl. I could not see eyes. I could only see the absence of frost shaped like where eyes would be, and the suggestion of a long something between them sliding against the glass, with the sound of a glove dragged over rough ice. I dropped the van into drive. The deer was still across my lane, so I steered into the oncoming lane, leaned on the horn for the formality of it, and crept past. When the headlight slid over the carcass, I saw what I'd missed in the first look. The snow around the deer was scattered with dark little pellets and splinters of something like bark, except it wasn't bark. They were fingernail-colored and curved, and I didn't think about it too hard. The rule said, keep moving. I pressed the pedal until the needle found 60. The hazard lights swept silently as they cancelled. In the side mirror, the world fell back into itself. Red reflection shrinking down the white road, the trees swallowing the place where I had stopped, as if it had never been there. When the voice came the 3rd time, it didn't bother with my name. It just said, wait, in a tone that made my hands tighten on the wheel, because it was so close to genuine. Then it put my brother's laugh after the word like a charm tied to a handle. The laugh arrived a breath late, without warmth, and hung in the cab for half a heartbeat before the rush of real engine noise erased it. False relief again, the feeling of my van smoothing out, the road widening near Lake of Two Rivers, the subtle lift that comes when you pass a landmark you recognize. I told myself that whatever had been in the tree line was tied to that spot. Territory. I told myself I'd left it behind. Then something moved with me in the mirror. Not in the road. In the strip of forest paralleling the highway. A shadow the height of a light standard ran with the van for 7-8 seconds, keeping pace without effort, like a trick of parallax, except there was nothing else moving to make the trick. It never came closer than the birch trunks. It bent once, folding at a hinge too high to be a human waist, and I understood in a simple animal way that the antler shape I'd taken for branches did not come off with a shrug. They weren't antlers like a buck's, not symmetrical. They were bone-coloured reaches that found the night the way a root finds a crack. The breath in the cab steamed and then didn't. I realised I was breathing too shallow to fog the air. Past Mew Lake, the mirror went empty. The van's heater finally pushed some warmth into the footwell. My feet hurt where blood started to think about returning. I kept my eyes on the road and didn't touch the radio. The trees on both sides felt like they'd stepped in a pace, closing ranks. I didn't see another vehicle until the gate lights at the Oxtong turnoff burned through the pines like a dawn. I pulled into the lot there and sat in the idling van until my hands stopped shaking. A plough truck sat empty beside the office. A coffee cup steamed on its dash, forgotten. On my windshield, the fern frost had receded, but the place where those two circles had trenched in the pattern stayed a little clearer, like twin coins pressed against glass and then removed. The circles were at my eye level when I sat up straight. I delivered to the lodge and signed a slip with a polite hand that didn't belong to me. On the way back, in daylight, Highway 60 looked like any winter road. Salt dust, crusted shoulders, moose crossing signs with snow hats. Where I'd stopped in the night, there was no deer. There was only a shallow rut curved through the powder to the tree line, as if something had pulled a burden into the trees and then decided the road was too bright for feeding. I told myself I'd imagined the voice because I was tired and cold. I told myself the laugh was air in my vents. I told myself a lot of things so I could keep driving that route. But I don't stop on that stretch anymore. Not for animals dead or alive. Not for lights behind me or people stepping into the lane with their hands up. If you drive it, don't either. If you hear your name from the trees in February, keep your window up and your hands on the wheel and your speed steady. If something calls you little brother, remember that winter there is things that feed on warmth and memory in the same breath, and they will put those breaths together the best they can. I still get text messages from my brother on long nights. When the phone pings at 2:17 a.m., I let it sit face down and wait until morning to read them. The road through Algonquin doesn't love it when you stop, and whatever learned his laugh that night, whatever pressed those two perfect circles into my frost, didn't love it when I left. Rule learned. On Highway 60 in February, don't answer when the forest knows your name. Late ice sings like an old ship. When it's healthy, the song is deep and far off. Tonight it feels too close. A steel saw humming against the bones of the lake. I'm alone in a one-man shanty. Canvas, sled runners, a porthole window fogged at the edges. I'm a seasonal ranger doing midnight creel checks, which is a gentle way of saying I go hut to hut making notes while everyone else goes home. The storm that teased us at dusk never came. The world outside is patient and white. The heater ticks. My thermos cap doubles as a cup. The auger hole at my boots glows a little darker than the floor around it. Even with the LED, the water reads like a pupil. When I blow across my coffee, the steam drifts toward the hole, thins, and slips down. Drafts are funny on lakes. That's what I tell myself. Something booms in the ice a few shanties out. It travels under me like a whale rolling over. The walls breathe a fraction with it, canvas tightening and slackening around the frame. I wait for the second note. Ice almost always answers itself, but the echo comes as words instead. Anybody out? Here. The lake breaks the phrase across two notes, the last word landing a half beat after the first, as if it had to find it. I know exactly what it's mimicking. 10 minutes ago, stepping off the sled, I said the same thing into my scarf out of habit. Anybody out here? We call so we don't surprise folks. It's all manners out here. Manners and rules. I hold my cup still. The heater sighs. I pretend the sound came from a hut farther down the line. People joke through thin walls at night. They practice being less alone. The aerator in my minnow bucket kicks on with a soft buzz and starts to chatter. I don't have minnows, just habit again. I like the hum. Tonight the hum picks up a rhythm, a low, fast burr that thickens into syllables like insects getting together to form a word. Out here, it grinds. Then you hear the order wrong and earnest, like someone laying tiles with a spare hand. I put my palm on the bucket lid. The vibration keeps speaking into my skin. The flasher sits by my boot, a little circle of a screen tracing depth and life in lines. Green for me, yellow for maybe, red for fish. It usually shows the lake like a quiet room with a floor. Now a bright vertical bar rises from bottom to halfway and holds. Not a fish, not bait. It's like something tall has moved into the cone and refuses to resolve. Ranger, the aerator says, trying my job on. It hits the R so hard the lid flexes. I set the cup down and watch the hole. Bubbles feather up from the dark and vanish, as if the lake just remembered how to breathe. Rules help in the park. You make them before you need them so you don't have to argue with yourself later. The rule here is, don't talk first on singing ice. If the lake wants conversation, it can prove it's the lake. I wait. I listen. A truck door thunks faintly across the flats and goes nowhere. My heater ticks down a notch and stays lit. The flasher's red bar leans a hair toward me and settles again. A soft snap comes from behind my heel. The clasp on my spoon box has sprung itself open. I look down at the little chrome latch hanging stupid and upset. I didn't touch it. Cold can make metal misbehave. I close it, seat the lip, push until it clicks. 2 minutes later, it rests open again like a mouth that forgot the last part of a word. Under the skim along the hut shadow, something moves in a long, slow drag parallel to my boots. I can see it because the skim is a clear sugar glaze over darker, older ice. The dark underneath gathers itself and slides, leaving no bubbles, just a suggestion of a ribbed back turning once as if deciding. When I step, it steps with me a beat later, keeping the same polite distance, not following so much as reflecting, like a shadow that understands but refuses to be where a shadow should be. I pick up the spud bar, punch the floor in front of the sled runner, and count the stakes home. 1, 2, 3. The steel rings dull and reassuring through the wood. A good 3 inches of late crust before the honest blue. When stress ice speaks, you listen for breaks. This is only song. I tell that to the small animal part of me, and it nods without believing. Here, the aerator insists. It has my cadence almost right now. It tries again with a different tool. The little zipper on the door seam trembles and bounces a syllable with its teeth. Not a knock. A stutter. My own breath answers it by running ahead into the hole and vanishing, thin as thread. I don't switch the heater off. I don't give it that permission. I cinch the hood, lift the flap, and step into the white. The lake is flat enough to be a trick. Stars would help, but the sky has put down a lid. I drag the sled tight behind me, the plastic making its steady whisper. There's a line of reflector stakes set by the club. You follow them home in weather, one to the next. An electric rabbit for cold people. I set my eyes on the first diamond and walk. The ice sings a short, unhappy note at my weight, and then another a second after. the rhythm of a call and its poorly learned reply. The first reflects on my jacket, the second on the sled side, pinballing light around us like we are being counted. The vertical bar on the flasher, I realize I carried it out of habit, and it's still on, keeps pace. Even away from the hut, even moving between holes I did not drill, it shows me a solid presence rising to mid-water, sliding along in the machine's cone like a person holding a doorway and walking with me from behind the glass. I clip it to the sled so I won't see. Halfway to the next stake, the world under my right boot goes the wrong kind of soft. Not a break, a breath. The skin of ice dips a touch, the water under it pulling at me the way a tide pulls at ankles, and the steam from my cuff goes not up but down, pouring neatly into a hairline crack that wasn't there a second ago. The ice inhales. I hold my breath without meaning to. When it lets go, it does it slow, as if reluctant. I take another step, and a shadow passes under the skim to my left. Deliberate and unhurried, matching my pace again, not committed to me, only practicing me. The pressure ridge at the far shoreline lifts with a sound like a barge turning in sleep. I don't run. Running on late ice is a way to put your legs where your head hasn't thought about yet. I count the next 3 stakes and touch each one. 1 touch, 2 touch, 3 touch. The lake gives me the echo count a beat behind, a footfall inside a footfall, and I pretend it's wind trying out a new voice. When shore takes me, it does it the way shore always does, abruptly, like a friend you forgot you had stepping out of a crowd. The sled tips over dead weeds and slush granite. Snow squeaks with land under it. The singing goes from marrow to backdrop. At the truck, I sit with the door open and the dome light off and listen to my pulse make choices. The aerator's hum is still saying something in the sled, a small, dogged version of my own voice running a sentence out to the end and starting it again. When I unsnap the lid, it stops. The box clasp on the spoons hangs open a 3rd time. 1 slot is empty now. The card still holds the shape of the spoon in its clear blister, like a body outline, but the metal itself is not there. There are tidy explanations for tidy parts of this. Heat moves strange over water and under canvas. Cheap lids warp. Sometimes you miscount slots. None of those tidy parts add up to the way the lake learned my words in pieces and spoke them back through a buzzer and a zipper. None of them address the way the flasher showed me a tall, uninterested guest walking hole to hole with me long after I left the hut. I don't fish after midnight anymore, not even for work. If I have to visit shanties in the dark, I hum instead of talking until someone else does, so I can decide who I'm answering. The wall phone rang, even though the copper's been dead since October. It was the small beige phone by the map. No caller ID, no display. Just a bell that shouldn't have had a line to ring on. I'd come back from the pit toilet with my parka open and my breath making sails, set the kettle on the hot plate, and there it went. 2 delicate chimes and then silence, like a polite person testing a door. I lifted the receiver because that is what your worst habits make you do. Northwatch Station, I said. I was the only one there. We close at 5. I was catching up on campground fee reconciliations and waiting on the furnace to stop rattling. 2 voices tried my name at once. They overlapped, not echo, not a radio delay. One came from the receiver, thin and papery like a tape. The other floated in from the metal vent above the bookcase, carrying more air than sound. Both said Mara, and then both said it again half a beat off, misplacing the question mark, as if they were following each other badly around a blind corner. I set the receiver down gently on the desk without hanging up. The furnace shuddered as if embarrassed. Heat came with a dry, hollow breath. The vent grill hummed like a throat trying a note, and then tried my name a third time, getting the shape better, but the warmth wrong. The station after dark has 3 noises if you're used to it. The soda cooler, the furnace, and the ice in the roof pipe settling. Tonight, there was a 4th, a soft, delicate rattling at the edge of the roof, like fingernails on shingles. Except slower, thoughtful. It didn't travel. It existed in a circle, then stopped, then existed again a few feet over, as if something were deciding where to place weight. I told myself, raccoons. That's the kind of lie that lets you breathe evenly. The kettle threw a thin whistle. I clicked it off and didn't pour. The big map of the district hung behind the counter. The fluorescent tube above it flickered to a dimmer tone, stuttered and steadied. From the receiver, still off the hook, came the sound of office air when a vent kicks on. The little chaotic hush. And tucked under it, the harder voice tried again with my name and somebody else's. Mara? You locked the side? I'm out front. That was close to how my supervisor talks. Same rhythm, same clipped calm, but the vowel on the front slid wider than it should have, as if the word didn't fit the mouth entirely. I turned the chair so I could see the glass of the entry door and the black beyond it. The outside flood over the porch throws a patient circle. Snow was still sifting, but lightly now. The walkway showed a thin, even crust unmarred by anything with feet. The door handle wavered faintly in its reflection, and then went still. The Trailcam screen on my desk blinked ready in the corner. I'd pulled the SDS earlier from the feeder lot to catalogue nuisance Fox visits. On a stupid impulse, I slotted the card from the porch cam and tapped through the files until the newest thumbnail appeared. Blank frame, time stamped 2 minutes ago. No picture, only black. I tapped play anyway because sometimes you catch audio. I heard the porch. I heard the faint hiss of the flood. I heard my own chair legs thrum in tiny, delayed sympathy as the cam's mic and the room agreed that time was moving. And then I heard 2 people ask me to let them in at the same time, each with the same sentence clipped a different way. It's cold. Let me in, the wall phone version said, on the tape, cutting the word cold off too early. It's cold, let me in, the vent version said, placing the weight at the end like a doorstop. They were trying the same line with 2 different emphases, like kids practicing a chorus part. I muted the clip and the voices didn't stop. The receiver kept breathing. The vent kept speaking. They didn't seem to need the devices anymore. The building itself learned the sound. You don't open doors after hours. That isn't superstition. It's policy. The night after we posted the winter closure signs, a drunk decided the ranger desk was customer service for his life and should be open. Ever since, you speak through glass at night. Another delicate rattle skated across the roof, 3 feet in a new direction. I snapped the porch flood off to kill the reflection. In the dark glass, I could see more of the room behind me. The map, the brochure rack, the little hand-labeled binder that says lost and found. Over my shoulder, something pale moved across the ceiling, where the vent blows, the suggestion of a long jointed shape rolling just outside the grill. Too slow for heat shimmer. 2 more rings from the wall phone, except it wasn't ringing this time. It was the bell moving without sound, the clapper traveling under my skin. I set the receiver back onto its cradle. pressed the hook until the line went dead, and unplugged the cord for good measure. The dial tone died like someone cut a vein. The vent didn't care. It kept whispering at a steady pace, and the ceiling trembled once as if something pressed its palm there, deciding on thickness. If I'd watched our safety videos recently, I would have done something different. Instead, I did the dumb, brave thing we always do in lists after we make a rule. I went outside to see. The air had that brittle, powder sugar feel winter gets when it's thinking about turning. My headlamp cut a tunnel. The station's shingles wore an inch of new. In a neat row along the lower edge of the roof were 4 perfectly round circles of glossy not snow, each the size of a dinner plate. They weren't melted so much as erased, the way a warm pan erases frost from a window it never touched. Between the circles, the snow was undisturbed and clean. No paw tracks, no sliding. Just 4 bright rings and then nothing. Like someone had set their hands carefully in sequence and lifted them again between breaths. I stepped back, lamp tilted, and the world down the hill exhaled. Not wind. The drifts around the fire ring pushed outward in a slow, sighing slump from a single point, as if something below had bloomed and then decided against it, returning the snow to itself in a soft collapse. The sound was like a pillow finding your head when you turn. Behind me, from inside the locked station, my radio chirped. The little programmable unit we keep on local called me by name, in 2 voices. One my supervisor's and one mine, stacked. Mara, status, they said together. Then again, slightly misaligned. And the second time the word status stretched and bent like a tin can being stepped on politely by a heavy boot. I could have been wrong about the rings. Ice does odd things on roofs. Heat sneaks through seams. I could have been wrong about the snow. Sublimation and sag will trick an eye. The radio calling me in my voice at the same moment a second me was still answering it from the desk in a dead silent room. That part is the one my head can't store correctly. I didn't go back in through the porch door. I walked around to the mechanicals instead. The furnace sits in a small outbuilding that used to be a woodshed. Its thin door stuck on ice before it gave. The thermostat inside read 64 degrees, and the unit rattled on the drawer like a throat clearing. On the plywood wall, someone had penciled old notes. Change filter, clean vent cap, do not run fan with chimney shut. I opened the service hatch and found nothing dramatic. No nesting, no obstruction. Just a smear of something like freezer frost where the intake joins the plenum. A white breath caught and held. My radio crackled again from my chest this time. The real one. A trooper on county asked for a check of a deer strike up the highway. His voice was normal, and the station's wood seemed to loosen a notch around my spine. I answered him, and answering him put pieces of the world back where they belong. When I finished, I thumbed the volume down and counted the gap between my words and the station's walls speaking them back to me. The gap was half a heartbeat. It would have been easy, in that cold, to believe the building had simply built an echo of its own. It would have been easier than the alternative. I left the porch flood off. I left the wall phone unplugged and the radio on scan. I brewed a cup I didn't drink and stacked the fee envelopes twice because my hands needed work. On the Trailcam, another new file appeared. Black again, no picture. Only the surprise of my voice and someone else's trying on top of it. Both of us asking me to open a door I wasn't near. When my relief came in at 6, his boots marked the walkway first, neat and real. He stamped them on the mat and did that grin people do when they bring warm donuts into a cold building. "Why are the porch lights off?" he asked. Then, halfway through his second sentence, The vent over the bookcase breathed the same phrase a fraction of a second behind him, and he stared up at it like it had grown teeth. We ate in our coats by habit. I told him what I had and what I hadn't done. We went out together to look at the roof and found only a solid, honest crust, no circles, just dawn brightening the white. You can explain a lot after sunrise if your head is stubborn and your hands like things that can be mended with tools. We fixed the furnace rattle with a shim. We taped gauze over the vent grills because it made us feel better. We silenced the wall phone by moving it to a drawer. The Trailcam kept its black thumbnails and its audio. We printed the log sheet and filed it. I didn't write a conclusion. If two different versions of the same voice ever try to speak to you through a building at once, you'll know it when you hear it. You won't need a rule. You'll just stand very still until the ductwork forgets your name, and the snow remembers how to be only snow again. The generator at Tower 19 died, and my handheld answered me back. The call came through as a voltage alarm just before midnight. A gust line had pushed across the ridge all day. By evening the snow was fine as salt and the temperature had a dry bite that stole sound out of the trees. I took the snowcat up from the service road. The world inside my headlamp a tunnel of white flakes with no end. The tower a suggestion of a darker dark that only resolved when the cat's tracks curved into the compound. The shed should have been humming. Instead, there was only the tick of hot metal going cold. My phone showed our link flatlined, RSSI0, then a small pulse to minus 40 decibels M, then nothing. 2 seconds later, another pulse, like a heart trying not to be noticed. I killed the cat and sat for a breath to listen. Ridge wind combed the guy lines and made them sing, but the note that came back was wrong, late, as if the line took the pitch and handed it to something else before returning it. I keyed the handheld on simplex, out of habit. 19, this is field 2 on site, I said, to mark the time for the log. The handheld answered in my voice a half beat behind. Field 2 on site, thinner, papery. I took my thumb off the PTT and looked at the speaker like it had confessed something. Okay, I told the cold, and my own voice told it back. Okay. The heartbeat was steady, not an echo. There was nowhere to bounce a loop in this snow. I turned the volume down to a whisper and got out. The padlock was a pain in gloves. I worked it until the shackle popped, then eased the shed door open. The smell was all dust and hot plastic going cold, the same way a server room smells when you shut it down after a storm. I put a hand on the generator cowling. The metal kept a little warmth. I cracked the choke and thumbed the starter. The unit coughed, failed, then caught, then settled into a tired, lopsided idle that smoothed out as fuel found itself. Lights on the rack swung green one by one. Power, charge, link. RSSI ticked up from 0 to minus 53 and held. The handheld, still quiet at my chest, heard me exhale and decided to practice it. Out past the spill of light from the shed, the tower's shadow fell across the snow like a ladder. Something interrupted it for a second. Tall, wrong angle. Then the wind took a breath, and the shadow settled like nothing had ever divided it. 19 to knot, I said, testing the uplink. We're back on general. I'm holding for load. The knock shouldn't have been in range on simplex. The handheld still gave me myself, a fraction of a second later, sounding like a tape recorded in a smaller room. Back on gen. Holding the cadence improved as if it had found my step to match. The exhaust plume from the genset rolled out warm and visible. A flag you can't see in daylight. On the far edge of it, where it crossed the snowcat's hood. Frost formed for an instant in two clear ovals side by side, clean coins pressed into the white, then refroze as the plume drifted on. I watched them appear and vanish. The handheld decided the word vanish was worth trying. Vanish, it said softly, without permission, and the speaker grill felt like a mouth. I clicked to the test code because that's what we do when things feel off. Each site has a shared check phrase we trade with ops. For 19, it's Sparrow left. No reason, just a word stuck to a compass. NOC, authenticate Sparrow left, I said, on the proper channel, for when the link comes back. The handheld answered with Sparrow left, a beat late, then tried left Sparrow, like it was flipping tiles around to see if we'd accept a different pattern. The guy lying above me thrummed again. The reply tone slid in after it with the same delay, the saddle following the horse. I could pretend it was ice expressing stress differently in different reaches, but the delay was exact enough to feel chosen. I don't like opening doors twice in any one night, so I finished what the checklist said I should do. I load tested the general. I checked the fuel level. I wiped the fog from the rack's Lexan door with my sleeve. The handheld said level after I did, then door, trying to keep up, little kid proud of being included. When I stepped back out, the wind dropped as if someone pinched the world's volume knob. The quiet that came wasn't the good quiet of a ridge. It had bone to it, as if sound was being held under glass. The warm exhaust dragged low and made a soft boundary in air. Something tall reached the boundary and stopped. The tower light blinked red, steady and indifferent. The tall thing didn't cross. It leaned, long-armed, as if feeling where warm ends and cold continues, and the heat threw its shape back into the plume like a mirage you don't want. Feel two, the handheld said, and then said it again a little better, like it had memorized where I breathe in a sentence. I clipped it to my vest so I wouldn't have to hold it. I walked backward to the cat, not wanting to turn my back on the line where Warm stopped. The cat's black hood reflected the shed light and the blink of the tower beacon. In the reflection something passed. Too tall, too thin, moving too smoothly, so close to the warm border that the plume curled over an absence. The clear ovals fogged on the hood and then were just hood again. I set a road flare in the snow at the edge of the compound. I don't know why, except that heat is a kind of truth on nights like this, and I wanted more of it on my side. The flare made that soft hiss flares make, the sound of a thing that insists. Orange light painted the guy line and showed me it was still. The line's voice still came with a delay though, once from the steel, once from something patient, and just far enough away to be polite. NOC, call and response 99, I tried, changing tests, because maybe this was only me being suspicious in an empty place. The handheld answered with 99, in a tone that would fool someone who wanted to be fooled. Then it tried NOC, shaping the consonant like it hurt. I didn't answer. I turned the cat over instead, engine grumbling like a dog brought in from the yard. I backed out along my own track. The flare hissed smaller, and the warm border around the shed withdrew with it. At the edge of the compound, the cat's headlights made the chain link into bars. Something moved on the far side of them, tall enough that I felt it more than saw it, like a crane in fog. The chain link didn't rattle. The snow at its base didn't scuff. The hand held in my vest repeated the sound of the cat's reverse alarm, a beat late, a little shy, as if it were trying to ask me not to go. Down in the tree line the wind came alive again, as if it had been holding its breath. The tower disappeared behind firs and drift. I stopped once to look back. The beacon blinked its steady red, indifferent to everything. Nothing followed in the cat's lights. The radio said nothing until I got to where the service road met the highway, and then, in my brother's rhythm, but with my city's vowels, it tried one last time to make a human out of static. You forgot me. The delay was the same half-beat it had always been. It didn't sound like anyone I knew once you stripped the shape away. At the depot, the gen hours logged themselves and the alarm cleared. The NOC never heard my tests. They showed my site back up, and that was all. I wrote more than the checklist asked me to. I included the odd RSSI pulses, the duplicate guy line tones, the handheld repeats. I wrote the part about the heat border even though there's no box for it. When I hung the handheld in its cradle on the wall, it spoke in my voice one last time, half a beat late, and said very softly, "Okay." I left it there and drove home on empty roads that refused to echo me. The Summit Pines Motor Inn was almost full because the highway closed in both directions. I was the night clerk with a coffee gone to mud, a bell that no one rang, and a hallway camera that liked to drop into snow static whenever a plough went by. After 10, the stranded families went quiet. The ice machine hummed like a cat down by the end door. Heat clicked in the baseboards. The storm had burned itself down to a sift. I locked the office hatch and slid my stool so I could see both the front door and the long runner past rooms 9 to 20. Room 17 had a towel under the threshold from a guest who complained about drafts. Close to midnight, someone knocked on the glass with a coin. Not 3 taps, not any rhythm, just a polite little tick. A man in a beanie stood outside, shoulders hunched in the cold. He cupped his hands to look in and smiled like his face had forgotten how. I pointed to the printed sign. After hours, ring bell, present key, say passphrase. He didn't ring the bell. He mouthed something and pointed down the corridor, the way people do when they think gestures work through glass. I didn't buzz him right away. We've had incidents. Last week, a woman tried to crawl in through the breakfast room window because we were hiding her purse. We keep a passphrase of the night taped to the desk, changes each shift so we can tell at a glance if a lockout is real. Tonight's was written in Sharpie on a yellow sticky, blue salt. The coin tapped the glass again, and then a voice spoke from the end of the hall, behind the beanie man, where the ice door leads to the parking lot. "Kiddo," it said. It was my dad's voice. His voice from before the smoke and the cough, warm, a little amused, the way he sounds when I've forgotten my lunch and he's pretending it's a choice. He winters in Florida now. He doesn't say kiddo anymore, not like that. The sound came soft and a half-beat late after the coin, like it was waiting for a cue. "Kiddo," it tried again, more certain. I stood up without meaning to. The beanie man didn't turn. He kept looking at me through the glass, like he couldn't hear the hall at all. The camera feed for the corridor fuzzed, cleared, then fuzzed again. The lens faces down the carpet runner and the grey walls. In the distance, the red exit over the ice door paints a small square. In that square, in front of room 17's towel, the carpet darkened in a neat oval, then another, as if someone had stepped there with wet feet and then decided not to keep walking. No prints before them, none after. Just 2 dark footprints that ended the story where it started, toes pointing toward my desk. "Passphrase?" I said to the beanie man through the little round grate. Our breath made a greasy fog on either side of the glass. He frowned like the word didn't fit, then tilted his head and smiled perfectly friendly, and said, "Blue." "Salt," The order was right. The tone wasn't. He put the stress in the wrong place. Hit salt soft like he'd only ever read it. "What room?" I said. 17, the hallway voice said before the man at the glass could answer. It came from the end door again. My dad's sound fitted to a word he has never had a reason to say in that tone. The ice machine hummed. The hum matched the vowel just enough to make me feel sick. "Sir," I told the glass, voice steady, "knock on your room door. The guest inside will hear you." There was no guest. 17 belonged to a snowplow driver asleep in his truck outside, feet against the heater, nose under a cap. I just wanted the beanie man to go down there, away from me. He turned his head slowly, without moving his shoulders, like a portrait thinking about changing. He looked at the long hall, at the dark runner, at the two damp ovals that had no friends. He didn't move. He reached with one hand and pressed the lever of the front door, as if testing a stubborn jar. The polished steel bent under his palm a fraction, and held. No knock, a steady pressure, polite as a practiced handshake. The smell found me then, freezer burn and wet dog, and that penny metal note that makes your gums ache. It came from the end door like a weather front in miniature, pulled low along the baseboards, caught in the weave of the runner. It sat under the towel at room 17 and made the fabric a darker grey. I pictured it moving along the hall like cold water, except there was no draft, and the pass-through vent above my desk blew heat. "Dad," I said, because I am an idiot. The word came out like a string I didn't mean to throw. The voice at the end door caught it and practiced. "Dad," it said back, a little late, and then, as if pleased. "Kiddo," again, better now, as if my word had polished its mouth. The hallway camera dropped to black for 2 seconds, and came back to the little square of exit and the door and the towel. In those 2 seconds, more dark ovals had appeared, bare, human, heel and toe prints that came forward 3 steps from 17, and then stopped again, each one cleaner than the last. The carpet around them was bone dry. The prints themselves glistened like the wet had a mind of its own. "New policy," I told the man at the glass. "You still need the second half." There isn't a second half. Sometimes you make another rule on top of the first rule because your hands want something to do. He tilted his head the other way and smiled like he was pleased for me and said, "Salt blue." The right words, the wrong order. The end-door voice tried it a breath later and got it worse. Blue, blue. I picked up the phone to make the needless call. Nobody comes at midnight in a storm, but troopers like to be told when you think about them. As I dialed, the smell strengthened just enough to put a cold taste in my mouth. The lever on the front door depressed another careful 1/4 inch and held. The beanie man's teeth were very small and even when he smiled. "Highway patrol," said the operator, old as my grandmother. And the hallway voice said, "Patrol," just late enough to make my scalp sweat. I gave the city I haven't left in 6 winters. I said the words for a welfare check in a nice motel tone. The operator assured me someone was nearby. There was no human way that was true. It calmed me anyway. The prints on the runner dried as if a hand passed over them without touching. The towel at 17 breathed once and lay flatter. The camera flickered to a band of snow across the feed and back to clear without a single pixel of motion between. "Sir," I told the glass, keeping my eyes on his teeth, "we have to follow procedure. Go to your room. Knock. I'll watch. If they don't answer, I'll come with a real key." There was no they. There was no key that opens for cold. The lever let up like a sigh. The beanie man took 1 step back, then another. both strangely uniform, like a video on loop. He didn't turn. He drifted to the right, not walking, but arriving at the corner where the corridor meets the breakfast nook. My camera tracked nothing. The little square of exit turned the same red as before. The ice machine hummed and clicked. The voice at the end door said, very softly, "Okay," in my own cadence. And the word fell wrong out of its mouth and lay there. A plough idled into the lot at 12:32, with its orange beacon doing that pleasant childish spin. The trooper behind it stomped his boots in a way no one can fake, and pushed his face up to my window until his breath made a wild flower on the glass. I buzzed him. He grinned a real grin and shook himself like a dog. We walked the hall. We walked it with the trooper legs first, and me staying close to the wall so the runner couldn't decide to make an angle around my ankles. The two prints at 17 were gone, not replaced by dry, not replaced by wet, just carpet, with a memory of ovals if you breathed on it and stepped back fast. The towel owed me nothing, and said so in its perfect ordinary grey. The end door was locked, and the exit bar sat as it always sits, scratched to daylight metal by years of luggage. We opened it. The parking lot had a crust. In the crust, there was a single line of bare prints leading toward the slope by the ditch. They sank neat and deep, and then it was as if the world had been ironed. The crust became smooth 3 steps out. No scuff, no blown-in blur. The last print ended at its toes like the foot had found air. The trooper put a finger to one of the prints, the way people do around something that looks like an animal track, gentle and respectful. He didn't look up at the sky. I noticed that. We stood until my breath started to feel like work. Then we went in, made a report that should read like a joke, and drank the coffee I'd killed hours before, as if it liked us. In the morning, the plough driver from 17 came in with sleep at the corners of his eyes and asked if the ice machine was broken, because his cooler didn't seem to like the ice from last night. He held up a little cube melted through in a neat circle, like a bubble you could put your finger through and snap. He laughed like a dad on a long drive and said he must be tired. I said yes. There wasn't anything else to say that would keep the day clean. I keep the sticky note with blue salt under the blotter now, even after we change it. It reminds me that some nights a password is only a shape, and some voices can learn shapes. The thing that matters is whether they can own the weight of a word when they put it down. That's how you tell the hallway from the world. And when the coins tap the glass now, I let the bell ring on its own until the sound finds the right mouth. First starts are mine. I'm at the depot by 4:40. Lights off in the office. Bays blue, dark and cold as a gym. The buses sit with their noses at the doors, lined like quiet animals before a race. Outside, the ploughs throw a distant glitter down County 12. In here, it's just the tick of metal giving up last night's heat. I flip block heaters first, then the bay unit heaters, then check the chain hanger because if a strap's going to snap, it waits for a morning I'm alone. The PA amp is cut at the breaker after hours, mic locked in the office. Drivers start showing closer to 6. It's my hour until then. Something pages me on the PA anyway. Shop to mic, the ceiling speaker says. A little too clear in a room this cold. It uses my name, with the flat tone our dispatcher gets when kids are late and she's hiding it with polite. The words hang in the blue air, like you could set them somewhere. The breaker for PA is still down. The red flag on the toggle stares like a number. The mic is in the cradle, under the glass. Cord looped the way I left it yesterday. Dust catching dawn blue on the coil. The office door is locked. My pocket key tells me so against my thigh. Shop to Mike, the speaker adds, a fraction steadier. Then, like it's trying the sound, Route 12, preheat. We don't have a Route 12. We haven't since the county folded lines 3 winters ago. I stand under the speaker until my breath feels normal, then kill the bay fans I just turned on so I can hear better. The quiet that falls is the kind that swallows your throat at first and then gives it back when your heart remembers its job. 3 polite taps come from Bus 4's door. Even practiced. Not a driver's staccato glove, not a kid's drum. A rhythm I've heard before. The elevator knock of someone rehearsing being human. Hold, I say out loud, because sometimes instructions make sense to empty rooms. I walk the line of buses slow, letting my flashlight find only what I ask for. Mirrors, hinges, the curve where roof meets side with snow, lipped there like a white moustache. Bus 4's handle is in the down position by a hair, the way it gets in deep cold, metal remembering motion. I look for footprints on the floor where snow would tell me a story. There's only the grit of old salt and pencil eraser bits and a mitten someone lost last week, thumb chewed by a bored kid. I lift the handle and set it right. The door's gaskets sigh. I listen. Nothing. I move on. At Bus 6, the chain hanger rattles once. 3 clicks in a row, ratchet teeth lifting under no hand, and then hangs quiet and innocent. The strap over the spare tire moves like someone touched it and regretted touching it. I set a finger to the rubber. It's stiff as pipe. Shop to Mike, the PA says again, and the office glass throws me my own reflection with a tall wrongness in it. My jacket lengthened into somebody else's arm, in the way reflections can lie when they're cold and there's steam ghosting the pane. I wipe the glass with my sleeve, and the wrongness goes where wiped things go. Engines have a way of pushing back the bad. I plug Seven's heater in and hear metal change its mind. I hit the primer. The diesel catches after a cough and sets its own heartbeat. Exhaust drifts along the concrete, lays down in low light like a friendly dog, and then climbs as the backbone warms. The cloud makes a soft border you can't see until something steps up to it and chooses not to cross. Something does, not a person. Not anything with a country-issued vest. A tall, quiet shape reaches the exhaust line, leans as if curious, and the plume folds over an absence and comes back together. The line of warm holds. The shape waits. I can almost believe the heat is making tricks until Bus 8 starts and lays a second border, and the thing that would pace the bays resets to match. 3 taps on Bus 9's door. I don't look away from the line where warm meets cold. I say, "Hold there," to the shape and to myself, and walk backward until there's a bus between us and the exhaust from 7 and 8 has made a warm alley a person could be brave inside. The ceiling speaker clears its non-throat in a soft white noise and delivers someone's idea of our morning script. Drivers, check mirrors, check tires, announce stops, it says. Each clause in the right order, each stress a hair off like a person who grew up in the next county over and came here late. It adds, as if pleased with itself. Route 12 released, and the mic under the glass bobs on its spring, a half-inch like a nod. I go to the office door and put the key in. I don't open it. I turn the lever without breaking the seal and watch the mic through the glass. It bobs again like someone left a hand on the cord. The chain hanger clicks twice more, not 3, like it's learned to vary. Somewhere down near Bay 2, a door lever lowers and holds with a delicate pressure, trying not to trip the latch. The unit heater hums at a low idle and makes a cone of air you can see because every engine exhales truth into it. I bring 9 alive and then 10, building a row of warm margins the way we stack sandbags ahead of a thaw. The tall outline keeps to the cold. It isn't shy. It just won't step over warmth it didn't make. When I step into the cone to throw a breaker, it settles a fraction back the way a moose might if a truck got too close. No panic, just more space. "Mike," the PA says, practicing my name until the vowels line up. It gets close enough to fool someone who wants to be fooled. "Pre-trip complete," it adds, in our dispatch cadence, which makes me grin despite myself, because dispatch doesn't get in until 7, and she never uses complete unless she's writing. I climb into 12 out of habit, and then laugh because there is no 12. There is a bus there anyway. Old numbers peeled off the dash, and the new label not yet applied. The ghost of the old looks like a watermark. I thumb the starter. The motor thinks about it, catches, sets its rumble in the chest of the bay. On the glass above the wheel, the condensation that should trace my breath twitches a different way, as if something outside tried to make the fog and got the timing wrong, a half-beat slower than I am. 3 more taps, this time off the metal post by the tool chest. That one makes a string go tight at the base of my skull. A person would try a door. A person would call out. A person would swear when they chilled their fingers on a post. 3 polite taps on a post are practice, and I don't like when practice gets good. It doesn't get my name wrong again. It stops using it altogether, as if it learned not to waste it. It just pages shop and start and release as I bring the room to life, and the words feel less like instructions and more like it's saying them because I am, so we can agree the morning is happening. When the first driver arrives, she walks in with the weather on her coat, stamping salt onto a floor that already remembers 1,000 ghosts of mornings. She stops just inside the door, lifts a hand, and grins in at me through the blue dark. "You started half the fleet," she says, and her voice puts weight in the room that no speaker can borrow. "Yeah," I say, casual, as if we were 2 people and not 3. Felt like a cold one. She hangs her coat, rubs her hands, and talks about the stretch by the river. People fill the depot, up the way coffee fills a stomach. The PA goes quiet the instant a human voice that doesn't live in my head takes the room over. The chain strap decides it was never moving. The lever on bay 2 finds its proper spring. Sun slides up under the doors with the kind of dawn that makes even salt piles look like something worth naming. Exhaust goes from ghost to nothing. I flip the PA breaker on for real, watch the red flag hide, touch the mic and hear the friendly pop of live wire. "Morning, folks," I page, because I should, and because saying it tells me the room listens to the right mouth again. The drivers answer with the usual jokes about heat and roots and kids whose boots eat hats. When the last bus noses into daylight, I walk the bays once more. There are faint ovals on the concrete where the exhaust pulled and then lifted. Warm left behinds that look like you could step in them and come away with a better day. Between those ovals there are no prints. There's only the memory of 3 taps in my ear and a schedule I don't have. I leave the PA breaker on now, even after hours. It's worse when it pages from the dark, and when I come in before dawn, I start the 2 end buses first and let their warm borders meet. Work goes cleaner when you give cold a line it's not allowed to cross. Graveyard shifts taste like pencil lead and coffee oils. The logging yard slept under a sky the color of old steel. Trucks were stacked in neat rows, bunks empty, chains slung. My world was the scalar shack. A plywood box with a space heater, a thermal camera pointed at the approach, an intercom, and a red LED board out over the scale that says stop or proceed when I tell it. At 3:11, the radio check rolled over from the head office. I answered because I always do, even when no one's listening. "Scalar on," I said. "Yard is clear." "Yard is clear," the intercom repeated back a half-beat late, thin and papery, like I'd keyed it twice by accident. I stared at the talk button. It was up. The mic sat in its cradle, with the little wire pigtail relaxed. I killed the intercom with the toggle anyway. The green LED went dark. Out over the lane, the big board blinked once and settled on stop like an obedient dog. The heater clicked, small metal contracting. I moved my eyes to the thermal screen without thinking about it. It showed the yard in grayscale, trucks as dull rectangles, the shack a bright mouth, the scale deck a medium grey. Outside my window, old coal pressed its face to the glass. Inside, the air was dry and hot enough to make paper curl. A smell slipped under the shack door, as gently as a draft. Freezer burn, wet dog, the copper taste that makes your gums feel like you've been chewing pennies. It pooled ankle high the way cold does, sitting under the warm air like a thinking thing. The towel I keep by the threshold darkened a shade, as if it had breathed in. "Scalar," the intercom said. The green LED was off. The toggle sat at dead. The board outside flicked from stop to stop, like it was practicing the word. I reached over, clicked open the breaker panel, and killed the whole intercom circuit. The rack light went out. The board went blank, dead black against the snow. The speaker still offered me my last line, half a beat late. Is clear. My reflection in the shack window looked like a person I know. Two clear circles bloomed in the frost at my eye level on the outside of the pane, as if something had leaned its eyes there and tested the heat. The circles fogged and thinned and held, perfect coins of clarity where the cold should have been solid. My breath made its own patch of fog inside. For a second, the two patches touched and made a smear like a Venn diagram of bad decisions. In the thermal, a darker than cold shape, pressed to the bright square of the window from outside. It wasn't black, it wasn't heat. It was emptier than cold, the way a hole in snow is emptier than the snow itself. It flattened and lengthened when I moved, like it was practicing my angle. I picked up the yard phone out of habit and found the office line dead. The space heater ticked. The tower light at the gate blinked its slow red heart. No wind. The logs stacked by the knife gate loomed like cathedrals. "Truck 41, the intercom said from its dead speaker, improving the cadence. "Roll on scale." The LED board outside, unpowered, lit enough to say, "Stop again," with a dull, internal glow, as if letters had a pilot light. No trucks idled, no driver slept in a cab. The yard was a held breath. I don't leave the shack for little reasons. The last time I did, a fox made off with a sandwich through my unlocked door and left paw prints on the clipboard, and the crew laughed for a week. Tonight I stayed because my feet remembered heat and my head remembered the wrong smell. I opened the logbook to the page for anomalies. My pencil made a hard grey dot, and then a weight spike hit the scale. On the monitor, the digital readout jumped by 1,900 kilograms and held there with the bored patience of real cargo. The scale deck, through the thermal, showed no heat stripe. The tire cameras showed no tread. The yard speakers all off delivered my own steady voice. 41 stop, brakes roll back. The words were the ones I use when a driver overshoots. The timing was wrong by half a heartbeat. The delight in the word breaks wasn't mine. Negative, I said to nothing. The way you talk to a toddler reaching for a stove. Negative 41. The intercom said negative, a breath late, and then uncertain. Stop, like it was laying down tiles to see which ones would fit together and make a road. On the window, the two clear circles slid a fraction to follow my face when I leaned. The smell at the door deepened and then thinned. Not like a draft, there was no wind, but like something just outside had widened and then remembered itself smaller. The shack roof gave a small sound, delicate as a fingertip on a drum. I cut the yard lights for 2 seconds and let the yard go to the kind of dark that feels like a big room, deciding whether to accept you. When I brought the lights back, the metal roof over the window wore 3 perfect circles of clean, where the rhyme should have been. Dinner plate sized, spaced like careful handprints placed and lifted. Snow everywhere else sat unchanged. The 1900 kilogram lie held for 12 more seconds and then fell to 0. The LED board blinked obediently to blank. The intercom tried one last flourish. Scalar, it said in my cadence with my patience. Proceed. It put the stress on the second syllable, like a kid who learned English from signs. I didn't answer it. I reached behind the desk, pulled the little ceramic heater forward so it blew directly on the door, and slid the towel up tighter. Warmth doesn't solve a lot of things out here, but sometimes it draws a line that makes sense to whatever doesn't like to cross. The smell thinned, the circles on the glass frosted back in, and the thermal showed the hole pull away from the bright square with the reluctance of a palm leaving a window. When the first truck of the morning rumbled in at 4:58 with its marker lights blinking like polite insects, the board woke to proceed as if it had slept the whole time. The driver rolled onto the deck and the readout climbed in honest steps. He set his brake and checked his straps and yawned a yawn a human mouth makes. I watched the thermal. The only dark on the window was my own reflection being less brave than I like. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, casual, handing me his ticket through the tray. Stopped a sandwich thief, I said, casual back, because the story I could file was a fox, and the story I couldn't file didn't need to ride with him into the cut. After shift, I replaced the intercom fuse and the breaker and labeled the circuit with a strip of tape that says leave on. I kept the entry in the anomalies book to a paragraph. Weight spike without load, board glow while unpowered, frost eye circles at window, smell at threshold, no conclusion. The yard learns enough from us without help. If you ever work a scale alone and you hear your own words come back half a beat late after you've pulled the plug, don't step out to meet them. Let the heater draw its line. Let your breath fog the inside of the glass and keep your face where the frost can't decide which side to cling to. When the trucks come, the yard will remember what it's for. And when the roof wears perfect circles you don't remember making, leave them alone. Some weights aren't ours to move. The rule underground is simple. Tag in, tag out, and talk only to voices you can see. Snow hissed at the portal like sand. I keyed through the service door and stepped into the air that felt oven dry compared to the night. The adit ran straight for 100 yards, a black ribbon with a wet shine. Farther on, the drift pinched where rock had heaved, the timbers making a ribcage. I'm a mine safety tech. I was there after hours to verify 3 gas heads that went weird during a brownout. It was supposed to be in and out, confirm readings, reset, note the lift team, go home. I I clipped my brass check onto the tag board by the portal, 1418, because habits pay you back when you're tired. My handheld radio beeped a happy little chirp when it saw its repeater. Level 2, North Drift, I said, for the log. Tech on inspection. 2 versions of my voice answered me at once. One came from the handheld on my chest, thin and papery, a half-beat late, like somebody recorded me in a smaller room. The other rose out of the drain line to my left, a breath below words, as if the trickle in the pipe had learned a shape and decided to try it. They were the same words, misaligned, like 2 people following each other around a blind corner. I stood still and listened. The overhead fan pushed a lazy draft down the rib. It carried the sound and set it back down where it started. Tech on inspection, my radio repeated. A little better now, and the drain took the tail of inspection and stretched it thin, like a kid proud of knowing a long word. No smell, no cold patch, just voices that didn't belong to anyone here. I walked in slow, lamp bowing the dark a few yards at a time. My boots made those hollow wet steps that mark empty mines. The first head blinked green, then sulked to amber. I tapped it. It found itself and apologized with a steady green, easy. Second head had dust across the lens. I wiped it with a glove and set it clean. Third head, farther into the neck down section, was fine on readout and wrong on feel. It watched me like a thing with a pulse. Level 2 North status, I said, because I always say it at the pinch. It's like a sailor touching a doorframe. Status, the radio said, and the drain agreed. Late, the 2 syllables overlapping in the kind of chorus that makes the hair along your wrist think about choices. The timing was better this time. The pitch sat a little closer to the one I use when I'm hiding. I'm tired. Something new. Barefoot prints in the fine dust on the floor. They started 3 yards past the pinch, 2 human-shaped ovals with toes and a heel, and the slight splay you get when you're walking on cold concrete. They went forward 5 steps, to where the rib opened into a small stope full of old pallets, and then they stopped. No smear, no twist, no returning track. Just 5 honest steps, and then nothing, like the person had stepped up into air. I crouched and put my hand close, but not on them. The dust here lifts if you breathe hard. These prints had edges too clean for drafts. The toe on the left foot was longer than it should be. Maybe that's just how people are built, I told myself. People are built all kinds of ways. Who's inside? I asked the radio, because the part of me that makes safe lies wanted an answer that would keep the night orderly. Who's inside? It answered, making the same mistake people do when they don't understand a question and think saying it back buys them time. The drain whispered inside with a small, satisfied curl at the end, as if pleased to have found a place to put the syllables. Shared checks live in pockets and mouths. Every crew on this property has a call and response nobody writes down. Ours is stupid on purpose. I breathed slow and asked the thing I asked the lift team when the power's dodgy and the lights blink. What's stamped on my brass? A heartbeat late, the radio said. What's stamped? And then, a sliver later, on my brass. The drain found brass and stretched it until it sounded like wind. Neither gave a number. No one could guess 1418 without seeing my tagboard, and the tagboard was outside under the snow's hiss. A sound like a fingertip on a drum came from ahead, the lightest touch on glass. The refuge chamber door has a tempered window the size of a playing card. The glass caught my lamp and reflected a sliver of myself. In the sliver, something like a long hand slid down the inside of the pane and left no print. Only a dryness that fog couldn't cling to. The door lever did not move. The pressure gauge sat green. I didn't walk closer. I took my lamp off my hat and held it low so the beam skimmed the floor. The bare prints ended where they ended. Between me and that little pane of glass, the dust looked undisturbed in the way a lake looks flat when it's thinking of breaking. "Unit check," I said to the air, keeping my mouth gentle. "Confirm with brass." Sometimes you give the night a second chance to be as boring as you want it to be. "Unit," the radio said. "Better now." "Brass." The drain skipped the consonant and breathed ass, which made something in me want very badly to laugh and very badly to stop. Neither offered numbers, neither offered names. Both were happier saying what I just said. The tagboard at the portal clinked. I couldn't hear it from here, not for real, but my head put the sound there as if a small hand had moved a brass check in a neat, thoughtful way. I backed the way people back when they don't want to turn their backs on the story the floor is telling. At the pinch, the rib planks felt like ribs. I stopped there and tossed my voice gently down the drift like a line to see what it would snag. "Show me your boots," I said, because underground a joke can be a prayer. "Show me," the radio said, delighted, and the drain breathed boots like a secret. The refuge door did not open. The glass did not fog. A single drip from a crack at the back of the stove found the floor and made a sharp, lonely tick. Outside, something hissed in the real world, the snow brushing the portal again, like sand on a beach. I worked backward one more yard and felt the air change, the added exhale like a room that had held its breath as long as it could stand it. I didn't run. You don't run underground. The floor is a story told in tripping hazards. At the tagboard, my brass was not where I left it. It hung one hook lower, as if a thoughtful hand had decided my number belonged with the foreman's row. I did not decide that now. I put it back on my hook and pressed it there with the heel of my glove. The motion steadied a part of me that would have liked to steady a part. On the radio, my voice said, "Tag out." Half a beat late and just off enough to be a stranger wearing my coat. I killed the handheld with a switch. It stayed dead. The drain whispered tag until the word wasn't a word anymore, just a shape the pipe liked making. Then it fell quiet. The portal door opened onto a night that had learned to be itself again. The snow's hiss was only snow again. My truck sat where I left it, a comfortable rectangle, with a little heat still in the glass. I drove down the switchbacks like the whole hill was fragile and didn't look back at the orange dot of the portal light. Dawn crew met me at the office with stiff coffee and faces that make the dark look like a rumor. We went back as a pack, boots in old prints, voices overlapping in a way that only people can overlap and still land right. Inside, the dust had been disturbed around the 5 clean steps, in a clumsy half circle, like someone had tried to erase a sentence with the wrong end of a pencil. The refuge door window shone like a card in a magician's hand. The brass checks hung where names say they should. I logged the head resets, wrote more than I had to about timings and echoes, and the stupid question that kept its answer, and left the part about the drain for the space between lines. If a voice ever answers you from 2 mouths underground, ask it a thing only your hands can answer. Don't teach it numbers, and don't step close to glass where you can't see your own breath. When the last ferry cancels, the terminal sounds like a room waiting for a question. North Slip is a glass box, on pilings, with a ticket window too low for tall people and a PA that squeals any time you look at it. The dock lights make islands on the black water. The gulls sit hunched on the pilings like old men with their collars up. Wind comes across the bay in sheets that show nothing and carry everything. I'm the night attendant. My job after a cancellation is simple. Keep the barriers down, answer the phones, tell the late ones they'll make the 6 a.m. if wind behaves. I count the till twice. I watch the red rope on the gangway roll lazy in its cleat. I wash the window because bored hands make work. Near midnight, the PA gave a little open throat squawk and said my name in my mother's voice. It wasn't a sentence, just my name. A single word fitted perfectly onto a mouth that wasn't here. The timbre exact and the breath, the way I remember from kitchen calls. Warm, amused, like I'd left something where saucepans go. The cadence was a hair wrong, the weight of the syllable landing, where she never lands it. Then it tried again, closer. I looked at the mic handset through the glass wall of the booth. It hung in its cradle, coil cord neat. The PA amp's light showed idle. The board switch sat where I left it. I put a hand on the ticket counter because it felt like the thing to anchor. "Hello?" I said, because you say hello to PAs the way you say hello to rooms. The dock lights caught something tall where piling shadow meets piling shadow, and then didn't. The open air answered, not the speaker. The word came from outside with the same timbre, a half-beat late, as if the bay brought it in on a separate wind. My name again, fitted onto the night like a key that thinks it belongs in any lock. A smell found the floor at the same time, freezer burn and wet dog, and that copper that turns your gums into coins. It pulled in the baseboard corner by the mop sink and thought about going somewhere, and didn't. The space heater under the counter fussed at it and kept fussing. I picked up the phone to pretend at control and got a dial tone that didn't care. The gulls on the pilings had stopped making gull sounds. They weren't asleep. They were just absent in their throats. The red rope creaked on its cleat. The creak got an answer a breath later from the open air, same pitch, like the dock had decided to practice harmony. I slid the ticket window open 3 inches because the glass felt like a thing I should test, and 2 clear circles bloomed on the outside where eyes would be if a face leaned there. Perfect coins of clarity in frost I had wiped an hour ago. I slid the window shut and the circles held, fog thinning in the neat edges like a good stencil. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice said from the PA. Then from the night. Then from somewhere between the two like a stereo set a tick-off. She hasn't called me that since the summer I came home from a party at dawn, and she decided adulthood should come with different nouns. The word landed with care, heavy on the wrong half, like a child setting a dish down too gently so it won't break. "Ticket office is closed," I told the air, the way you tell a raccoon that your porch isn't dinner. "Come back at 6. I put the PA to local, and the mic crackled because that's what it always does when it knows you're nervous. On the dock, the mooring rope paid out an inch by itself and tightened. Not wind. Wind doesn't have the patience to pretend to be hands. The cleat's creak got its delayed echo again, and the echo made my molars say please. I went to the back wall for the barrier key, and the space heater under the counter threw a sound like a sigh when I left its cone. The smell thickened in the spot by the baseboard, and then thought better of itself when I returned to the warm. Heat doesn't stop everything that wants in. It does set a line. "Mum," I said before I could stop myself. The word came out like a string. The bay picked it up and handed it back a half-beat late in my mother's tone. Proud, to be exact. "Mum." Then's sweetly, "Sweetheart." It was getting better at weight. The gulls took off at once without a noise, the whole row lifting like paper. The red rope rolled once and settled. I watched the place the eyes would be and didn't see eyes. Only the absence of frost in 2 circles and a dark behind them that understood light enough to avoid it. If this were a different job, maybe there'd be a rule for this. We have rules for everything else. Tug makes call, crew drops ramp, clear the pedestrians, don't jog on the ramp. There isn't a line in the manual about the bay practicing your mother's voice into your window at midnight. I kept the barriers down. I moved the heater so it blew on the baseboard corner. I took my phone and, without aiming at anything, recorded 30 seconds of the booth and 30 seconds of the night. The PA didn't care that it was on local. It gave me my name again. Open Air handed it back on the beat. My phone heard both, small and tinny, not proof so much as a souvenir of being awake. The tall suggestion at the piling edge leaned when the dock light swung in a short gust, and the lean had hinges in the wrong places, a long bend up high. It wore the dark like a good coat. The antler shape I'd taken for drifted sticks above it moved when it moved. When the gust passed, the shape became a piling shadow again, the way stories become the thing you can live with in the morning. At 2:14, a truck rolled into the lot and stopped at the barrier. A man got out with his hood up and his whole life in his shoulders. He tried to smile through the glass. I cracked the window to hear him, and the 2 clear circles slid a fraction to keep me in their coins. The man didn't see them. He asked if there was any way we'd make one last crossing. I told him what I tell everyone. If wind behaves, 6 o'clock. Behind him, out in the open dark, the night said my name in my mother's voice again, quieter this time, as if embarrassed to be caught practicing. The man didn't react. He hugged his jacket and said thanks, and got back in the truck and left the way people leave when the world has decided something for them. By 3, the smell had lifted. The PA had gone silent in the way off machines pretend they were never on. The 2 circles frosted back into the rest of the glass, as if the cold had remembered itself. Gulls came back to be ridiculous where they like to be ridiculous. The red rope stopped rolling its thoughts in the cleat and hung like something you can trust. Morning crew came in with their hands full of coffee and the wind already different. I handed off the till, the keys, and my phone with the 2 recordings cued on low volume. We listened in the noisy way people listen in the fluorescent light. You could hear a woman say my name, and then the same name a heartbeat later, thinner, from somewhere. The mic wasn't pointed. You could say, anything makes ghosts out of speakers in old buildings. You could say I was tired. You could say open water carries sound. We put the first walkers on at 6:03. There was no announcement about midnight. The dock did what docks do, and the bay did what bays do, when men with vests and lines and calm hands tell them a story they understand. I wiped the ticket glass a second time, slow, and the cloth caught on 2 places that felt a shade smoother than the rest, like coins had been held there and warmed the pain from the wrong side. I set the heater back in its corner and let the booth become the room it is in daylight. I didn't say my mother's name again. I took the long way to the lot and walked where the shadows looked like they belonged to things I could point at. The whiteout came up the ridge like a tide that forgot it was water. By the time I reached the 3rd landing of the fire tower, the world below had become a blank that ate shapes. Winter caretaker isn't glamorous. You check shutters, you grease the hatch, you make sure the solar panel hasn't iced solid. Today I'd hiked up in a teasing flurry that turned to nothing, then closed in all at once. The tower took the wind and made it into a voice the way a bottle makes a note. I parked on the lee landing with my back to the steel, unrolled the little propane heater we keep for fingers, and let it chew the edge off the air. The stairwell breathed cold down my collar in steady lungs. The hatch above me tapped once in its hasp and held. "Caretaker to base," I said into my handheld, because pretending there's a log keeps your head tidy. Holding at L3 for the blow. 2 versions of me answered. One came from my radio a breath late, thin, papery, as if the repeater were inside a shoebox. The other came from the throat of the stairwell itself, the wind shaping the words through the gaps in the treads. Same sentence, misaligned by a half beat, the chorus a choir makes when it rounds a corner out of step. At L3 for the blow, the stairwell finished, catching up, pleased with itself. I watched my breath weave with the heater exhaust, and lay a warm veil across the space between me and the open shaft. The air on the far side of that warmth felt crowded without having anything in it. The trick with towers is not letting your brain build faces out of angles. I kept the lamp low, so the treads stayed treads and the steel stayed steel. Snow drove through the open grids and turned into hard little pellets on the landing. The heater ticked as it found a rhythm. The radio tried again, now a shade closer to my cadence. "Caretaker," it said, and the stairwell agreed a beat behind. "Caretaker." The 2 voices not quite singing, not quite copying, as if each were teaching the other how to be me. I didn't try a secret. Secrets teach more than they protect. I clipped the handheld back to my vest and adjusted the heater so the cone of warm reached just to the lip of the landing and no farther. Heat draws lines you can trust when sight can't. Something tested that line, not a footfall, a pressure. The kind of shift air makes when a big animal changes its mind. The warm veil trembled and then settled. I could have told myself it was wind behaving like nothing more than wind, except that the heater flame fluttered left when it should have fluttered right, as if an absence leaned over it and breathed in. I've got a small trailcam zip tied to the catwalk outside the level 4 hatch. It's pointed at the stairs because the crew likes catching porcupines on nights they do their slow parades. The cam's IR cuts to black in snow like this, but sometimes the mic still picks up the world being itself. I flipped the little receiver on my belt and watched its idiot green LED blink ready, with the steady manners of a child who wants you to be proud. Above me, the hatch shivered on its pin. "Open?" The stairwell tried, hopeful, and the radio said, "Open," half a beat ahead, like they'd changed leaders. I said nothing. I warmed my palms in the cone and let the breath return to my nose in a way lungs-like. The heater's presence set a soft boundary that felt more solid than steel. The chorus tried a new trick. It put 2 different emphases on the same sentence, overlapping them like the doc had done in town that time storms cancelled everything. "Come up?" the radio asked, light on the verb. "Come up," the stairwell said. Wait on the last word, as if that were the part a door listens to. The pair together made a chord that wasn't unpleasant if it hadn't been mine. The wind slacked for a breath. In that slice of quiet, something tall moved behind the open treads above, a wrong hinge, a bend too high, the suggestion of long reaches that were not railings. The heater flickered low and then came back, stubborn as a good dog. I kept my boots inside the warm. The stairwell kept its distance in the cold, as if the warmth's edge were a curb it couldn't quite decide to step off. It spoke pieces of my earlier sentence again. Better this time, ambitious, then fell back to simple agreement. Holding, it said with the radio. Pleased to know a word with a hand in it. Minutes went long. I thumbed the Trailcam receiver once more and saw it trip, then trip again, then again. 3 events stacked inside snow black. I couldn't see a thing on the little screen. I could only hear. 2 versions of my own voice asked for a check. One version tried a laugh I have when I'm pretending I'm not nervous and overstretched it into a scrape. The other version picked the scrape up and made it into a word I don't use. The heater climbed and held. When the whiteout thinned the way whiteouts do, in layers like curtains deciding to be sky, I packed the heater, clipped the radio open on scan, and stood. Descending, I said out of habit, because I like a narrative when stairs want to take my feet. Descending, the radio said. The stairwell thought about it, tried the word half a beat later, and lost the ending in the wind like a person mislaying an accent. Down is easier to lie to yourself about. Everything that was above you is behind you when you go down. I kept to the inside run and let the cold pour past my back. The heater's leftover boundary sat on the landing like the memory of a shore. When I reached the second landing, the white had pulled itself back enough to be called air again. Spruce tops existed. The ridge had a colour you can point at and pretend is green. At ground, the tower stood as towers stand. A thin insistence. My Trailcam blinked a cheerful new files 3. Back at the bunkhouse, I queued them up. All 3 were blank frames. Each had audio. In the first, my own call for bass answered twice with a half-beat offset. In the second, something that thought it had my tired laugh tried it until it sounded like a hinge. In the third, the stairwell spoke open, and the radio spoke open just ahead of it, and the 2 together made a chord I could feel in my teeth. Morning crew swapped stories about drifts licking truck doors, and a fox trotting down the middle of the road like it owned a bigger winter than we did. No one wanted to hike up after breakfast to look for tracks that wouldn't be there. The wind had scoured the catwalk clean. It always does. I left the heater on the landing when I went back at noon to clear the hatch. I shouldn't have. Propane is for supervised moments only. But there's a comfort to seeing warm air make a shape out of nothing. The stairwell didn't speak. It breathed like a thing that had eaten too much attention and needed to be quiet to digest. I cracked the hatch and let sunlight, thin as paper, make trusses polite again. If you ever get caught on a tower in a whiteout, and your radio and the stairwell decide to harmonize, give the warm air a job and let it do it. Talk less than you want to. Don't teach the wind your new words. It learns fast. And when the world comes back in layers, take your own voice with you down the stairs and leave whatever practiced it on the landing where heat remembers to be a line. Last chair had gone 20 minutes before the wind got serious. Patrol swept the line, gave me a thumbs up from the cat track, and vanished into the spruce glitter. The lift house felt bigger without voices. A plywood box around the motor, counterweight chain, and a little square of safety glass that looks out to the chair bay like a porthole. I was there to tag the panel and do a last walk. The bull wheel ticked as it cooled. The counterweight creaked once, settling like a ship. Snow found the seams in the door and laid a quiet line of sugar. We keep an old liftline phone in the bay. Plastic case faded to the color of dried bone. It rings like a smoke alarm and smells like rubber glove. The run was dead. The phone had no reason to care. Ops, top house, I said into my handheld for the log. Panel tagged, rolling to close. Panel tagged, said the phone on the wall, a half-beat late, in a thin voice that sounded like my own squeezed through a pipe. I stood still until the tick of cooling metal came back into the room to remind me I hadn't made that up. The phone's hook switch sat up. The cable hung slack. The line is only live when the run is. Tonight, the run was not. I crossed to the phone and lifted the receiver like you touch a sleeping dog. Careful, friendly, a little guilty. The line hissed faint and thin with the kind of snow static that lives in old wire. Under the hiss, the motor hum found a note and held it. The note put teeth on a word and said, "Tagged," almost the way I do. "Very funny," I said, which is how you talk to rooms when you want rooms to be simple. I cradled the receiver and set it back down. The motor hum swelled and leaned through a second note. There are harmonics in old machines if you let them. And the counterweight chain creaked a beat after. Exactly, as if the chain were answering the motor's question. At the safety glass, frost feathered from the edges toward the middle in that fern pattern that looks like a good drawing of ice. 2 clear circles bloomed in it where eyes would be if a face leaned from the other side. I aimed my headlamp and got my own reflection, pale and startled. Behind my reflection, where the bay is a slice of night, something tall lived at the edge of where the beacon swung, swaying a fraction when the light did like it thought it should. We've got a phrase of shift, the ops lead writes in the little logbook by the panel. A dumb word to use as a quick check when you answer the line at odd hours, so a voice on a phone can prove it's attached to a body you know. Tonight's word was in Sharpie on the corner of the page, boxed so you can't miss it. Granite. Out of nothing but training that has saved me more times than I can justify, I picked up the wall phone and said, casual, "Ops check." "Word?" "Ops," the phone said, a breath late. "Pleased to be included." "Check." Then, dutifully, "Word." It waited. "What's the word?" I said, because there's a way to do this and I wanted the way. "Granite," the motor hum said in my voice from the empty room. The consonant, too round. The counterweight chain creaked granite, a beat later, with a dry little R after the N, like it had learned reading and not speech. Neither gave the cadence our ops lead puts on that syllable when she's mad at wet gloves on the panel. "What's the word?" I said again, because repeating a test never hurts the test, and because a thing that gets it wrong honestly sometimes gets it wrong more honestly the second time. "Grain it," the phone said softly. "Weight on the wrong half," as if it had broken the stone for ease. The motor hummed a third time. Granite, closer. Proud for passing a quiz it hadn't. I set the receiver down, the way you set down a kitchen knife. The frost circles on the glass stayed coin clear. When I shifted left, they shifted a fraction, as if they were watching my shoulder, not my face. It's a trick of curved panes to do that, I told the part of my head that keeps me from running. Curved panes make ghosts of honest things. The panel's tag out hangs on a red lock. I tugged it to feel it bite. Behind me, the old indicator on the motor controller needle twitched without power. A small, polite lift and fall like a stethoscope, catching a heartbeat in a room it shouldn't. "Top house," said the wall phone in a nicer version of my trail voice. "Roll chairs." The phrasing was perfect. The patience was not. It placed patience in the wrong part of the breath the way a child does when they're proud of new words. Out in the bay, beyond the glass, a chair swung once on no wind and came to stillness with the heavy manners of big equipment in cold. I didn't step out. The world outside the door was not for feet that wanted to belong to me tonight. I logged what I could. Time, tag out, the needle twitch. I wrote 2 lines more than I needed to because ink calms. Phone repeated calls after run cold. Motor harmonic matched speech. The handwriting looked like someone's who likes things to be regular. Mine. The beacon on the tower turned slow, laying a rind of light across the bay. Then the lift house window. Then the far tree line, and back again. When it crossed the tall suggestion at the edge of the bay, the suggestion leaned as if light pushed it. The antler shape I wanted to call Dead Branch moved with the lean. When the light passed, the shape became a shadow built by nothing. The ball wheel ticked as it shed its last heat. Under the tick, the motor carried a steady, gentle vowel that you could lie and call a bearing if lying made your hands feel better. The counterweight chain answered the vowel in the same beat, proud of its new trick. I turned everything I was allowed to turn. I left everything I was supposed to leave. I put the red lock through the tag's hole, pulled, heard the satisfying little clack when the shackle found home. The wall phone whispered home right after, like it wanted to be in on the feeling. Patrol knocked on the lift house door with gloved knuckles. Fast, human, a reporter's knock, not anything practiced. "Top's clear?" a voice asked, ordinary and annoyed at ankles. I cracked the door. Cold went to work on my cheeks. The patrolman's headlamp threw honest angles around the bay. Chairs were chairs, trees were trees. I nodded, and he nodded, and he disappeared back into a world for people. When I closed the door, the frost circle stayed, a shade lighter than the pane now, soft-edged, like places glass remembers hands. The phone on the wall didn't speak again. The motor learned silence politely, like a student dismissed. I sat a minute on the crate by the oil and listened for a voice that had learned mine, and for once chose not to use it. Down at the mid-station, the wind had begun to carry the kind of snow that makes cardboard out of jackets. The cat track looked like a good decision someone else had made for me. I followed it to the shop and wrote the last line you write on nights when strange things practice being you. Left line secured. Return with daylight. The whiteout ate the taillights first, then the road, then the rest of the world. I'd made the mistake of chasing the plow's glow too long. When it peeled off at a turnaround without signaling, because who signals to the void, I drove another 100 yards into my own headlights and felt the tires lighten. I stopped because the car had the sensible idea before I did. The engine idled like a patient animal. The heater hummed thin and hopeful. Outside, snow ticked on the hood with that dry hiss that sounds like an old TV. Mile 118 has an emergency pullout. A flat stamped spot with a blue call box under a little plexiglass roof. I knew it because I pass it twice a week after night shifts. The pullout's reflector post announced itself as a grey ghost in my high beams. I nosed the car toward it and felt the relief you feel when a thing you can name agrees to exist. The call box wore a rind of rhyme. The plexi windscreen had a waist-high gap with a swinging flap so you can reach the phone. I left the car running, hazard on, and walked in a world that began at my knees. The air snapped against my teeth. My scarf went rigid in one breath. Snow lodged instantly in the seams of my boots and thought about becoming permanent. Under the call box hood, the wind softened from slap to push. The blue box had a handset and a big red help button the size of a biscuit. A paper roll peeped through the printer slot. Its tail curled moistly like a tongue. A tag on the side said, "Inoperable," in a user's pen from 2 winters ago. Underlined twice. Someone's mitten print lived fossilized on the plexi at child height. I pressed the button anyway. Habit is stronger than certainty. The box did nothing. No click, no polite whine of life trying. I lifted the handset. Dead plastic. The kind of dead that makes you aware of your pulse. Okay, I told myself. Because talking in storms keeps thoughts organized. We go back to the car. We wait for a plow. We don't do heroics. Okay, said the handset, half a heartbeat after me. I froze, head cocked like that might help my ears. The sound had my shape in it, the way I draw out vowels when I'm tired, but thinner, papery, as if pressed through a straw. The speaker in the box's faceplate looked dark with frost. No LEDs lit. Snow found the lip of the roof and arranged itself like icing. Dispatch, I tried, because that is what you say here. Mile 118, vehicle disabled. Dispatch, the handset agreed, small and late. Mile 118. It rounded the teen wrong, put the weight when no one local does. Wind pushed the plexi flap against my hip. A new sound came. 3 polite taps. Not the frantic knock of someone caught out, not a desperate pound. 3 even knocks that moved along the plastic in a slow line. Left panel, center, right. The rhythm was the same wrong kindness I'd heard once in an elevator lobby on night shift and pretended was a kid. Tap, tap, tap. Then a pause, as if the tapper were considering the idea of a door and liking it. I kept the handset up because I didn't know what else to hold. My breath smoked into the plexi and came back at my cheeks. Name? I asked the box. Which is not what you're supposed to ask a box. But I'm a nurse, and the small questions are how you separate people from fog. Name, it said back, gladdened by a word it could own. Then, trying on a tone, okay. It was learning where breath belongs. The car idled with its orange triangles of hazard ticking like a patient. In my beams the world ended in white 6 feet out. A vertical shadow, the height of a light pole, occupied the next breadth of road, too tall to belong to any person who should want my attention. It leaned once, a hinge too high, as if considering which way wind goes. On the little roof over the call box, 3 perfect circles appeared in the rhyme. Clean, wet rings the size of dinner plates, evenly spaced along the lower edge as if warm hands had set themselves there and then been lifted. The rest of the roof stayed furred in white. Melt doesn't draw circles that neat in air like this, I told the part of me that requires sentences. Melt is messy. This was careful. The taps came again, 3, but now not along the plexi, along the car, faint and distant across the hiss. Left rear window, then the small triangle by the trunk, then the right rear. A gentle progression like a neighbor seeing if anyone's home. Every tap in the same wrong measure. I didn't turn. You can know a thing is true without giving it your face. Engine stalled, the handset suggested. Half a beat after my silence, trying to fill it. Are you alone? The second question landed too fast, like whoever was asking had leaped to it without letting the first have space to mean anything. Maybe it was personality. Maybe it was hunger wearing courtesy. I'm fine, I said, and then heard the handset smile in my own voice. I'm fine. If you can call a voice smiling, this one did. A small wideness in the vowel, like it had accomplished something and wanted me to notice. I set the handset back in its cradle so gently that the hook didn't quite press down. On the little paper roll, the tail uncurled and then recurling without wind or touch, as if it had learned that a gesture is a kind of word. I tore a strip off and saw nothing on it. No thermal black, no message. Plows run on the hour, I told myself. We sit in the car. We make ourselves small. The polite taps reached the front of the car. They paused. They were thinking. Then the hood made a sound like a hand laid flat there, gentle. The hazard lights ticked. Tick, tick. In the rhythm between ticks, the call box took a breath. Passenger, it tried, late and more curious than worried. Okay. The part of me that knows emergencies started doing its inventory. Hat on, scarf tight, car close, hands warm, door locked. Do not teach it. Do not offer words you want to keep. I stepped back into the world and let the snow take my shins. The car sat small and right, the idea of a house with orange windows. The vertical shadow at the edge of the beam leaned again, very slightly. The dark above it sprouted a suggestion of points I once would have called dead sticks, until they moved with the lean. I didn't name them. Dispatch, the call box offered from behind me, bright with new skill. Okay. It put the weight in better places now. It was imitating my patience. I got in the car and locked the door. I didn't start a call. I held the phone in my lap like something to remind my hands to be still. The heater had been working the whole time. The air inside was a relief my skin drank. The windshield shellacked itself with rime at the edges, where warmth didn't reach. 3 taps came on the driver's side, tidy as ever, not at the glass, at the mirror. The little triangle of plastic that faces forward flexed and returned like a fingertip had tested it. The call box speaker clicked once like a throat. Then my voice, thin and a heartbeat late, said from outside, "Please unlock," polite enough to be a favor, wrong enough to be not mine. It got better on the second please. It put the weight where my mother puts it when she's talking to someone else's child. I turned the blower a notch up. The heat fogged the lower corner of the glass. The fog made 2 clear circles on the outside where circles had no business being without a face to press them there. I made myself look away without counting their distance apart. In deep weather like this, the road decides what you'll see. I saw headlights long blurred to milk turn the next bend and become a plough's high lamp. The spinning orange on top did a child's dance. The plough's blade sent a long whisper of snow fountaining gentle to the right, like it was tucking in the whole highway for bed. The 3 taps stopped. The tall shadow at the edge of my beam unbent, as if offended by the idea of light belonging to anyone else. On the call box roof, the clean circles did not frost over right away. They held wet a fraction too long for science, like coins just lifted from a warm palm. The plough pulled alongside me, massive and ordinary. The driver's shape inside the cab was the kind you can trust. Bulk of coat, gloved hand, a thermos silhouette. He rolled his window down and made mouth shapes I could feel without hearing. I cracked mine. Wind tried to live in the crack and didn't. "You okay?" he yelled over the day he carried into the night. "Stuck," I said, and watched his eyes for the flick I've learned to read. Does a person see the story I see? His eyes did not flick. He jerked his chin in a gesture that predates language, backed in front of me, and gave me a piece of road. I put the car in drive. The tires thought about it, then agreed. The call box handset rested still in its cradle like a person asleep. The printer tail curled in a small question. The roof circles began to grow rime feathers again, slowly, like frost had to remind them of a lesson. We went out at 10 miles an hour in the plough's private weather. The world returned in slices. The idea of a shoulder, the suggestion of mileposts, a sense that there are other towns when you have roads to point at them. At the junction, I eased off into a lot that had been a lot all day. The plough gave me a short blink of its orange and went back to make other people's mornings possible. I sat until my breath belonged to me again. Snow wore my hood like a hat it was tired of. In daylight, the pull-out at mile 118 looked like a place you could stop for a picture of winter if you were naive. The call box roof was uniformly furred, no circles. The printer held a blank tongue. The plexi wore nothing but old scratches and a mitten print, and the memory of fog if you wiped and then forgot you had. My tires track laid a neat line that stopped being a story where the plough had given me a new one to follow. I don't stop at call boxes now, not unless my hands are shaking, not unless there's someone with a vest and a radio and the power to insist they are themselves. Snow does good work at erasing. Voices out here do their work in the white space erases for them. If one ever calls you polite from a blue box under a neat little roof, let the politeness sit in the storm between you. Let it practice all by itself. Follow the orange light when it arrives, and when you tell the story later, leave out anything that learned your tone. It keeps less of you that way. The lodge at night is a big animal sleeping with one eye open. You learn where it snores and where it listens. We'd shut down early for weather and sparse bookings. The bar's last couple drifted out at 11. Housekeeping left a neat pyramid of towels on my desk as a joke. I ran the night audit, refilled the cocoa packets, and took a slow lap at the mezzanine because the storm kept changing its mind, and I liked to see the front door with my eyes. The mezzanine rails make a square around the lobby. Down below, stone fireplace banked to ember, couches like brown islands, a taxidermy trout over the mantel that never looks at you, but somehow knows you. The vestibule's air curtain throws a steady, invisible waterfall across the inner door, so skiers don't freeze the desk. Baseboard radiators tick and sigh along the walls like old men repositioning their knees. At 1:46, something small but wrong began. The radiators started to speak my sentences back. Not the words at first, the cadence. I said, "Audits on batch 2, just to make sound in a big room," and a radiator by the stairwell hit a series of clicks that landed in the same up-down rhythm, like someone tap-tapping a pencil in a test. Audits on batch 2. A vent in the ceiling exhaled after with a low, breathy shape of the same length. It had the feeling of a sentence trying on a coat. I laughed a little because buildings do this. You live in them long enough and the pipes learn your schedule. I finished the batch, wrote the number in the ledger, and said, "Checks in drawer 2. Down by the far corner, a different radiator tapped a little beat that matched the spacing. The vending machine by the elevator caught the hum in its motor and stretched the last syllable like it wanted to be part of the joke. Drawer 2. Lorries came in sideways sheets against the vestibule's outer glass. The air curtain made its soft roar. I walked the rail toward the trophy case and the guest book we keep by the fire. My ID badge swung against my chest on its nylon cord, a little plastic rectangle with my picture in it that says, "I belong to this building at this hour." The smell reached me on the corner past the elevator. Freezer burn, wet dog, and the coin metal tang that lives at the edge of your gums. It pulled along the baseboards near the vestibule door like uninvited fog. The part of the mezzanine above the vestibule sits in the path of warm air rising. The smell stayed low anyway, even when the air curtain threw its steady, warm fall. "Okay," I said to the room, because posture matters in quiet. "Okay." I meant it for myself more than anyone else. "Okay," a radiator said back in a shy little series of pings, a half-beat behind, pleased to be included. The ceiling vent followed with a breath that shaped itself into a soft echo. K. I leaned over the rail to check the vestibule. The inner glass had fogged a little where the warm air hits cold. 2 clear circles bloomed in the fog at human eye height, neat as coins pressed to glass, outside the inner door, where no face should have been, unless you like to stand in the air curtain and blink while it combs your eyelashes. The circles held as if the cold had learned how to be warm for 2 inches. I straightened and kept moving. You can look at something until your head decides it was never there. Better to pass it by and catch it again, out of the corner of your eye like wildlife. The vending machine hummed itself into words. I could hear them if I didn't try too hard. Desk, open, please. The word please landed heavy on the wrong half, like a kid showing off manners to a grown-up who won't be impressed. The elevator motor, off for the night, offered a faint, matching chord through the shaft, the 2 notes arriving separated by a breath, as if the building was teaching itself a duet. I set my hand on the top of the trophy case because polished wood makes you brave. The trout didn't look any different. If the lodge has eyes, they live in very ordinary things. On the way back to the desk, I passed the mezzanine break in the rail, the one gap where you can step through to the little storage landing with the mop closet. My lanyard snagged there sometimes on the newel post. I'd asked maintenance to sand the underside where a screw bit stuck out. Tonight, the badge slipped past, clean, and then someone tugged it. Not a snag, not the lanyard catching and sliding free. An honest, deliberate tug that lifted the badge off my shirt and snapped the plastic pennant against my sternum hard enough to sting. The nylon bit into the back of my neck. A second tug came a hair later, lighter, testing. Like a curious hand learning what weight does, I stepped back by reflex, pinning the badge with my palm. The elevator's hum and the radiator tapping stopped in the same breath. An obedient silence that felt like a held inhale. I brought my other hand up to the lanyard clip to unhook it, and the plastic snapped instead, clean, loud in the quiet, the kind of break you feel in your low teeth. The badge fell at my feet. The cord whipped my collar. I listened to my heart for a second. It made choices I would not have made. The sting at my sternum spread like someone had drawn 2 fingertips across my chest and then forgotten to take them away. The air curtain threw its steady warm line across the vestibule inner door. Down there, 3 feet off the carpet, heat shimmered in a sheet you could almost see. On the far side, the smell pooled and put a shape inside itself that didn't like the warm. It leaned toward the line once and leaned back, as if something tall and thin had placed its weight there and discovered a curb it could not step over. The radiators started up again with better rhythm. Okay, one clicked in little copper syllables. Help, another offered from the corner by the guest book, brighter, as if proud of the new word. The vending machine hummed a longer note, and bit by small bit, shaped it into please again. A little more human this time. The vowels softened. I picked up my badge because that's what you do with names. The clip's teeth were bent wrong. I tucked the plastic rectangle under the ledger like putting it away would keep my name safer for a minute. I didn't like the feeling of being addressed from the vents the same way the call boxes talk to the highway. The phone at the desk gave a polite half ring. It does that sometimes, when the fax line burps and the wind remembers copper. I didn't answer. The mezzanine felt like a mouth you could accidentally teach a sentence to if you said anything but the smallest words. I stood at the rail above the vestibule and watched the inner glass. The 2 clear circles had scummed to a plain blur at the edges, as if breath were happening on both sides of the surface at once, and neither owned it. The smell made a thin seam against the baseboard by the umbrella stand. The air curtain flattened it like a hand over wrinkled cloth. because rules have saved me more nights than bravery, I flipped the switch for the fireplace fan so the ember bed sent more warm air up the stone. The big animal that is the lodge likes heat lines. It does not like to trespass on itself. The vent settled into a new pattern. You could hear the sentence bones if you didn't force them. Open, now, okay. The okay got better. It had weight in the right place. Somewhere, on the far side of the lobby, the old jukebox in the bar flickered to life. Just its backlight stuttering and the CD carousel chittering once like a bug. I pulled the bar's power from the strip just because. I should have taken a picture of the circles, I know. Phones make us braver in dumb ways. Instead, I watched them, and my watching seemed to offend them, because the fog crept back from their edges and the glass became glass again. Honest and dull, and hard to remember believing. Motion in the vestibule. The kind that isn't motion so much as a change where a change shouldn't be. The rubber mat lifted at one corner in a slow, thoughtful breath and lay itself back down with a sigh, smoothing outward from a central point, as if something underneath had thought about blooming and then decided not to. Close, the radiator by the fireplace said suddenly, bright as a child pleased with its new idea. The vent above it agreed a half-beat later, close. The vending machine hummed now in a note that, if you turned your head and squinted your mind, was very close to my mother's laugh, run through a pipe and scraped thin. I shut that thought in a drawer where it belonged. I wrote in the audit log because ink calms me. House. Took towels to 222, bar strip off, fireplace fan on. And then, smaller, vents learning cadence, lanyard tug, air curtain line holds. At 2:08 the wind veered and the snow slid off the eaves in a soft heavy sheaf. The lodge's body settled by a hair. On the mezzanine the smell thinned. The radiators clicked themselves back into being only radiators. The vending machine hummed itself into appliance again, shy about its earlier ambitions. In the little glass vestibule, the rubber mat lay innocent, and the baseboards were baseboards, and the umbrella stand was only a stand. I made cocoa out of the packets I'd just stocked, and drank it in tiny, ridiculous sips, because hot, sweet things have a way of tying nights together when the building wants to sing your sentences back to you. At 6, the manager came in with wind tucked into her scarf and opinions about service roads. The air curtain threw her hair to one side. She asked why my badge was under the ledger, and I told her the clip broke, and she said we have a box of them in the back. We looked at the vestibule glass in real daylight, the kind that puts things back where they belong. If you wiped at a certain spot with the cuff of a sweater, the cloth caught twice as if the pain had learned to be smoother there overnight. We both lied to each other about why glass sometimes does that. She read my audit note twice and did not make the face people make when they think you are making a joke. We walked the lobby and the smell wasn't there, and the radiators had gone back to complaining about their own age, and the vending machine made the good clean hum of a thing with a simple job. Later, in the staff bathroom, I took my shirt off to change and found 2 faint crease marks across my chest, where the badge had snapped back, parallel and too precise to be from the lanyard alone. I touched them, and they felt like nothing, just a memory written lightly on skin so you know the present happened. I didn't take a picture of that either. There are nights where the building learns you, and nights where you learn the building. If you ever have to cross a mezzanine at 2 a.m. and the vents are practicing your cadence, keep the warm lines alive. Don't let the room borrow your name through a piece of plastic if you can help it. And when something curious at the rail tugs just once more than a machine could, Hold your badge with your hand and say the smallest word you own until the radiators are only radiators again. Okay. A commuter train sleeping in a layover yard sounds like a neighborhood breathing. You can hear heat soak leaving metal, relay settling, the soft tick the cab makes when it remembers it's off. At 3 a.m, there's only me, a snow halo around the floodlights, and the long silver spine of a 6-car set waiting for first rush. I'm the hostler tonight. Move it, air it up, hand it to the morning crew, with brakes honest and doors civilized. My world is the A-end cab of 2419. A desk, a bank of dead screens, a radio that shouldn't reach anyone this hour, and a PA handset that only cares when the whole train is alive. Battery on, cab warm enough to think straight, park brake set, sand test good. Outside, the yard beacon turns slow and makes the cars blink like they're remembering something. MP41 to port control, I say out of habit, keying the yard radio so the log will have a voice later. Hostler in 2419, brake test to follow. Half a heartbeat after I let go of the PTT, the ceiling speakers in the cab say my sentence back to me. Not perfectly. Thinner, like my voice pressed through paper. Same words, same order, same tired patience, but late, as if someone else were deciding where the ends of things go. The PA handset sits in its cradle with its cord looped polite. The PA is dead when the consist is dead. Right now, the consist is dead. I freeze long enough to hear the cab remember it's a room. The heater fan makes a gentle whir. The wiper motor ticks once like a sleeping dog. The yard beacon paints the window again. I key the yard radio and say lighter. Say again, because sometimes the world is human. Say again. The ceiling answers in my voice, a fraction improved. The little chime the doors make when you arm them, 2 notes like a toy piano, plays itself softly, and then a beat later plays itself again out of time. I isolate the PA at the breaker because that's what the book says to do when equipment forgets who it is. The ceiling stays quiet for 3 breaths. Then the door chime gives me the toy piano 2 note, and the second note lands where a word would, as if the chime is practicing language and starting with cadence. Fine, I think. The set is a dumb animal after midnight, and animals get bored. Brake test, set, release, set, release. You can do it by feel if you've done too many nights, but I watch the needle because the needles like to be watched. Brake set, I say. The radio gives me brake set, late and thin, and the ceiling, breaker off remember, offers the same words as if it's helping. We use a stupid phrase of shift to authenticate remote commands when the radio's glitchy. A scrap of words that doesn't live on any board. The morning boss picked cedar left this week. It lives in my mouth like a splinter. You say authenticate cedar left, and if the voice you're hearing doesn't throw the weight in the right place, you don't take orders from it. I key the radio. Port control, authenticate cedar left. A breath later, the ceiling says, pleased with itself, authenticate cedar left. In my rhythm, but wrong on the vowel, like it learned the word from reading and never had to ask for wood. What's the phrase? I ask the cab, soft, because I don't want to teach. I just want it to fail in an honest direction. Left cedar, the door chime tries, the second note landing late, like it's proud of an answer on a test. The radio gives me cedar left, closer, but still missing the weight the boss uses when she's mad at fingerprints on glass. I don't answer. I open the side window 2 inches and listen to the yard. Cold comes in like a coin you swallow by mistake. The floodlights lay hard shadows, cars, catwalk, signal bungalow, and then make them polite again with every turn of the beacon. Far down the fence, something tall exists in the curtain between light and dark. It leans when the beacon passes, a hinge too high, reaching up into the part of a shadow where shadows don't belong. When the light moves on, the tallness becomes fence, as everything reasonable eventually does. Back in the cab, I finish the brake sequence because brakes like attention. The ceiling has mostly learned where I breathe now. Release, it says a hair after I do. Set, it echoes when I set. The door chime finds the shape of release as a pair of notes and plays it like it's proud to be allowed in the room. I leave the desk and walk back through the cars because a body goes where tools live. The lights are off. The aisle is a tunnel of salt dust and anti-slip matting that has a way of telling stories in prints. Near the mid-car doors, 2 wet bare footprints appear where there weren't any when I walked in. Human feet, heel and toes, and a slight splay, clean in the aisle's dust and melt, shining a moment before they go dull like every wet thing does. They walk forward 2 steps and then end at the seam where the floor panels meet, toes pointing toward the next car, and there is no third print. There are no prints past. They exist as if pointed at from somewhere that didn't need a foot to start. Hello, I say because you say hello in dark trains, not because you want an answer. The ceiling speakers a car behind me say hello back, with a warmth that isn't mine, half beat late, like it's practicing being friendly. I back up a half step because people are clumsy when they're scared in narrow places. The wet prints don't smudge. There's a clean edge on the heel, the way a body that doesn't touch dirt might make. The door chime sounds in this car and in the next, as if the 2 cars are discovering they can talk to each other. The second chime lags the first like a younger child agreeing with an older sibling. We had a guy last winter who propped doors open, drunk, cold, determined to make the yard his living room. I want that guy right now. I want anything human enough to complain about. I moved to the vestibule and checked the exterior door. It's sealed, no drift, the anti-pinch rubber honest. The cab announcement panel above me is dark. It shouldn't have words. It manages one anyway. The little LCD backlight comes up ghost pale for a second and shows stand clear in a dotty font I haven't seen in this equipment in years. Then it goes black. The yard board in the cab buzzes on with a hiccup, even though the consist isn't charging. For 3 seconds, the tonnage line shows 2.4 where the set is tied down. The load marker bumps up like a breath held. Then it goes back to 0. Ghost weight. Bad sensor, I tell myself. The kind that gives you a morning of you and a multimeter. The part of my head that keeps me alive writes the other version in pencil, where it can't smudge onto my hands. Something that thinks it should weigh something tried on the idea. Port control 2419, I say into the radio, because writing in air helps. We've got a phantom indication, possible board glitch. Isolate PA until depot. The ceiling answers me in my own voice a heartbeat late. Isolate PA, and then, as if relieved, Cedar left, to show that it's been a good student. I take the PA handset out of its cradle and set it on the desk, hook switch up. So anything that wants to pretend to be a line will have to pretend harder. The handset's little grill ticks once, a small, guilty sound. The door chime in the car behind me gives 2 notes fast, then again, with a late second, as if it's changed keys. I walk to the rear cab, because the best place to be in a boring story is the place with another radio and a handbrake. The aisle lights stay off. The tall thing that was at the fence doesn't move, but the light around it keeps changing its mind. Halfway through the third car, the prints appear again ahead of me. Just two this time, heel and toe, then nothing. I step over them because stepping in them feels like a thing you can't undo. In the rear cab, I crank on the handbrake, not because I need it, but because the human body likes the feeling of a wheel you can turn. Steel speaks through gloves with words like tight and set. The yard radio speaker in this cab is tired and staticky. It gives me my last sentence back as if it had to drag it up a stairwell. We have another stupid check. The one that keeps pranksters off the radios when bored teenagers find scanners. What color is my lantern? The right answer is yesterday's, red. And the wrong answer changes every time you teach it. I don't key anything. I bend toward the speaker and say, quiet. Lantern. A breath later, the ceiling speaker says, lantern, sweet as a kid. The door chime in the car ahead shivers like a dog dreaming. Neither voice gives a color. Neither voice owns a name. That's enough. I cut battery and sit with the set truly dead for the count of 20. The room changes. It gets more honest. The chime can't find its trick. The ceiling can't borrow me. When I bring the battery back and the cab wakes step by step, the PA and the radio behave like tools again. The ghost tonnage line doesn't twitch. Outside, a plough throws glitter along the yard lead and doesn't come in. Its orange dome spins the kind of spin that calms every primate who ever needed fire. The tall thing on the fence isn't there when the plough light goes by, and the part of the fence where it wasn't looks like every other part of the fence. I make the handoff call to the morning desk as if nothing odd has happened. I write more than I need in the log. Times, 3-second ghost tonnage, PA echo while isolated, chime sync. Under cab condition, I note frog wet prints, to and stop, mid-car. I don't tell a story. I stack facts where the next tired body can find them. At 5:45, the first operator arrives with a coffee that injures the air with how good it smells. He stamps salt off his boots and does that human thing of becoming the world I wanted all night. A person whose voice has weight in it that no speaker can borrow. I walk him through the sheet without telling him the part where I asked a hallway to authenticate itself. He touches the brake wheel and the cab accepts him, because the simplest magic we have is being the right animal in the right chair. We walk back to look for prints because it's easier to laugh at night when morning agrees with you. The aisle is dusty with the same honesty it had at midnight. No toes, no heels. The mid-car seam is just a seam again. He runs a hand along the overhead and says something about how cold finds aluminum. I nod like that was the moral. On the way out of the yard, the beacon bleaches the roofs white and then grey, and then white again. I don't look for perfect circles on rhyme or anything that would tell me someone put their hands where only snow should. I let the train be a train, and the fence be a fence, and the voice I used in the cab sleep in my throat where it belongs. If a car ever answers you back a half beat behind with your own patience, keep your checks dumb and your words expensive. Don't teach it the color you thought of first. If barefoot steps ever appear in your aisle and stop like they remembered gravity too late, step over them and keep working the list. Morning has a way of deciding what stayed, and it's better for everyone if the thing that wanted to learn your voice has to practice alone until the lights come on.